Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
See, it's just smoother now.
Right? I was going to say,
this is better. It's so much smoother.
It's good to be back.
Awkward pauses and stuff.
I listened to the previous episode, and I thought you did a great job.
We did. We were adequate.
I thought you guys did a great job.
We yes. If you go away again, we could do it. Doesn't mean we like it.
I was actually a necessity, sort of.
That intro I was saying in my head like over and over and over again, and then it got cut out of the YouTube feed.
Oh man!
Like, I was like, oh, and I nailed that part of it. It starts with me like just being like not talking. I don't know.
That's how it goes.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I'm like, and Pete? Anyways.
Well, regardless of the host, this is the podcast where we answer the cycling and triathlon related questions that you have, and you can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. We genuinely do come through all of those, and we pull a whole list of questions that we plan to go over. We even have a meeting over it where we debate and see which ones we want to cover.
It's pretty heated.
It does get heated at times. Yeah, it's true. And this is what we have for you today.
That's not a joke.
That's not a joke. It's not a joke. But first things first, we're just going to go into where I was in national championships. A few things. First of all, some congrats are in order to the Stance Pivot team. So Chloe Woodruff, she won XCO, which is Cross Country Olympic, which is...
We sponsor them.
Yes, we are sponsors of the Stance Pivot team.
This is pretty crazy. Listen to this.
Yeah. Yes, this is cool. So Chloe Woodruff won Cross Country Olympic and short track. She swept nationals.
National champion. And two.
Twice.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Times two.
Rose Grant got third place in short track. Amazing. And I think that she got fifth or sixth place in XCO. Nationals. Keegan Swenson won XCO.
Drink. Yes.
Pretty awesome. There we go. He did not win short track. I think that he got fifth maybe in short track, something like that. Sofia Gomez Villafania was not at nationals because she's Argentine, right? So she was down at the Pan American Games, which is akin to like the Commonwealth Games for those from the UK or pertaining nations.
4 years.
And she got silver at Pan Am Games, which is huge.
Amazing.
And so this team is just completely sweeping it. If you look at this year, Rose Grant is the current marathon champion. Chloe Woodruff has 2 national championships. Keegan has 1. Sophia has 2 national championships and a Pan American Games silver. All this year.
Just this year.
That's just 6 national championships and 1 silver in Pan Ams.
That's pretty amazing.
Over 4 people.
That's pretty amazing. And
that's crazy.
Every epic rides that Keegan's been at, he's been winning. I think Chloe has snagged 1 too. They've won some fat tire crits. I mean, it's been a really good year. Chloe won a World Cup. My goodness, she won the short track in Nova Mesto. Like, super good year. So congrats to them. And not on that team, but also awesome. And he's actually been on a podcast episode before, Justin Thomas. He's a masters racer in this region, a friend of ours and also TrainerRoad athlete. And he won the 40 to 44 cross country national championship this weekend.
I've got a bone to pick with Justin. He's still a Cat 4 on the road. I think this is his 3rd national championship.
I think
in
it is
mountain
his
biking.
3rd, yeah.
It's really annoying to race a hilly race against him. So please upgrade quickly, Justin.
He's such a good athlete. Really disciplined. Awesome guy. Extra athlete. Yep. Yeah. And just trains so diligently. And that's what happens. He also, as we joke all the time, he must harbor a tapeworm and takes care of the tapeworm because I've never seen a man so skinny. So
he's ridiculously lean.
In the forum right now, can you put in the link to the video we did about Justin trying to win cross nats?
Yeah. And you can find that at forum.trainerroad.com. Just search for episode 214 and you'll find everything for this episode. Tucker will be throwing in notes and all that stuff. And also, if you're just on the forum, you can throw in notes too. That's helpful. My nationals, I did not win a national title. I didn't expect to win a national title. I'm kind of on a 2-year build trajectory because next year I want to win at least 1 national title.
At least one.
Yeah, that's the goal.
It's just
shoot high.
He hangs out with Chloe, Rose, Keegan, and Sophia. Like at least 1.
If they're winning them, why can't we? Right? No. But anyways, I wanted to go into. So I got 9th in XCO. And which was about an hour and 48-minute race, I think, or hour and 46-minute race.
That's very good. Top 9.
Yeah, top 9. Yeah, the prestigious top 9. So top 9 there, and then top 6 in short track.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I got 6th there. That's actually
really good.
I was so close to 5th, it hurt.
How far off were you from 5th, and how far off were you from 1st?
So I think that I was a full minute off of 1st. And off of 5th.
Which event are we talking about?
at short track.
And how long short track?
Short track was 28 minutes.
Okay.
And I was, I think I was 6 seconds or something like that off of fifth.
Oh, no.
So I was close, and I was closing in on him. He's a podcast listener. I'm sure he's listening now. I think Mike, forgive me if I missed up there. But great race. The tricky thing about this, and we talked about this before, I had the elevation wrong. So short track started at 9,200 feet and climbed to 9,300 every lap, or 9,250. Jeez. And then XCO started at 9,200 roughly, and then it went up to basically, we were darn near 10,000 every lap, and we did 4 laps. Okay, that is really high. And the conversion should be easy, but we're talking plus 3,000 meters here. That's where it starts. That's not like where the tour barely gets close to that at the top.
Yeah, you're there the whole time.
I know, right? You hear about the high elevation. I'm like, what? And then you were to Leadville, which is even higher. I'm going to be there in a chair, handing you stuff. I haven't heard anything about nationals. We've done this on purpose, just so we can hear it all here. Yeah. I don't even know. So I want to know a few things. How did it go? Training equipment and stuff. But then also, what is it going to take to get to that? Get on the podium.
Get you on that podium.
Yeah, get the top step.
So, first things first, it sounds like we're going to go back next year, that the venue isn't going to change. So
that help?
This is applicable. Oh, it helps a ton.
It takes away a lot of unknowns, right?
Yeah, I know the only thing that would stop that is if Winter Park, or the people, I believe Winter Park, the ski resort there, I believe they're the ones that are hosting the event, really. And if they, for some reason, change their mind, then I'm sure it won't be there. But otherwise, I think it sounds like it's going to be there.
Ski resort in the summer is probably not pushing away business.
I know USA Cycling is planning on going back there.
Good.
That much I do know. So the course is really, so it's not that steep. So the climbing basically starts out, and it's like fire road climbing.
What percentage is not steep?
It's like 6%, probably 7% for the one portion.
Drafty?
It can be. And then it has parts where it tips up to like 10%, but it's a fire road. It's not like crazy steep until you get to the latter quarter of the climb. And then you go up a descent trail, a trail that's a green trail going down, but that basically means that it's got sections where it's like over 30% for very short periods.
Short pitches.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But basically, when you go around a 180, there's a big berm, so you're climbing up that, and it's kind of steep. So it starts out steady, and then it finishes punchy at the top. And then the descent, this was one of the coolest courses. I felt like I got, usually with mountain biking, you always feel like you climb forever to descend for a very small amount of time, and you kind of feel cheated on your reward, so to speak, if that's what you're going for. And on this one, I felt like the descent was longer than the climb. It was so much fun. I'm not sure how they did it, what sort of science was in play, but
it was power descent. Were you on the pedals, or?
Yeah, definitely in parts, and it was it would build up your momentum, and then in parts it would be kind of flat, but you'd be weaving through the trees, so it still felt like a descent, and you were pedaling.
That's probably why.
And it was great, and it was kind of tight and technical with a lot of roots, and then you'd hit wide open fast sections, and then the section coming back on the profile for anybody looking to do this event, it doesn't look like it's a climb coming back, and the trail's called Serenity, and it's a total lie. It's basically it's like surgy, rolling little punchy hills covered in roots and rocks. So it's kind of technical at the end. It's an interesting course.
How technical is the descending for people who are listening?
Yeah, so if I was to put if you were to look at a World Cup cross-country course, it's not quite to the gnarliness of something like a Mont Saint Anne, if you've ever seen that one. That one's really, really rough. It's much more like what you see at any typical World Cup, I would say. So, but it doesn't have huge drops. There's no jumps. Yeah.
It's not.
And especially when they added in rain. We didn't have rain for our race specifically, but for others they did. So the interesting part about that is that it basically opens it up so that a lot of different people can be successful. Doesn't just favor a really light climber. Sure. It can favor a really big rider that just has a big threshold. It doesn't also favor a rider that's extremely technically sound. It also can favor a rider that isn't as proficient in that regard. So, the descent was a strength for me, as it usually is. And the technical section, it was also a strength. I could pull out some time, but on those climbs, the better climbers would end up catching me.
Yeah, so what is let's do everything normalized to sea level right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was your power to weight getting in, and what do you think that the winner's power to weight is?
Yeah, so I was about, at sea level, I was probably about 4.6 watts per kilogram, and the winner, I reckon, was around 5.2 watts per kilogram, somewhere right there.
So a little over half a watt per kilogram.
Yep, yeah, so in other words, about 10% of where I was.
Okay, so can you, in a year, increase that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very possible to get there.
Yeah, I think you might have been able to do it this year if you'd been able to maintain the level of consistency you wanted.
You got sick.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah, and actually I have a spreadsheet that you guys can click into to check this out, and I'll make these public so then people can see it too, and we'll just post links in the forum.
This is very, to me, Chad, this is annoying because he didn't do that much training, and he's like, 4.6.
Yeah.
Right?
So
it just shows that he's got a high base.
Yeah, I looked at my training and I looked at
It does.
I used TrainerRoad and I looked at my calendar and I looked at the TSS and the time that I put in over the last month or over the last year. And looking at it, and you can see I highlighted where I was sick in green, so you can see that. But basically, yeah, I mean, I'm averaging anywhere around probably 7 hours for the last 6 months a week, which isn't a lot.
Not to win a national championship.
Not to win a national championship.
I mean, it's a testament to a couple things, both your genetic predisposition and also how quality trumps quantity. And it doesn't always trump quantity, but I mean, if you've only got a few hours a week to train, and you as a father and working a full-time job, you only have so many hours, so you definitely have to favor your quality.
And his years of, like, he's been doing, I know we've talked about sport, motocross doesn't seem like it's endurance, but it is.
It's really tough. Yeah.
And he's been doing it since what, 16, 15, 14?
No, younger than that. Yeah, I was like 10.
Mm-hmm. 10.
And then ski racing and that stuff
exactly.
too,
So years of a lifetime of doing this gets his bottom. I feel like you're off the couch is 4 watts per kilo.
Yeah, just under. Yeah, about 3.9, 3.8.
That's my regular.
That's what I used to think was mine, and then I really let it sink. I plumbed new depths.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think I can pick it up a lot, and I think I can get into where I need to be, and that's kind of the plan, and that's what I've been on.
So what kind of volume? Sorry to interrupt you. What kind of volume do you want to work up to? If you're averaging 7 hours per week, what do you want to be this time next year?
Honestly, if I can average, I bet if I average consistently, if I have 11 hours a week, then I would be fine. I would be where I need to be. It doesn't take that much more than that.
I think so.
Yeah. So, and really, like you said, Chad, it's all about quality within there. It's not just quantity. Yeah. And it's important to be realistic with yourself. So if you're listening to this and trying to find value from this, it's important to be realistic with yourself. And when you look back at your training, you may feel like you've done a lot, but it's good to look back in your calendar and see, maybe I didn't do as much as I thought.
Yeah, and when you do, really look at your consistency. Look at the peaks and troughs. And if there's big differentials between the two, it's absolutely something you can improve.
Yeah, there's those weeks that I travel and they just they set you back, and then sickness sets you back a whole month, I feel like.
Yep. And the other thing to keep in mind with this too is, for me, looking at it, it's really easy for me to say, I just can't train more, right? Because life does feel overwhelming and you have like so many responsibilities and but I think that we can always be more efficient with our time, and we can always squeeze in more. I mean, Nate, you were in here before the podcast this morning. You did 30 minutes, right? You're just squeezing it in. That
I find too, especially with the functional one trainer. I mean, come on now, trainer rides. Yeah. They're way more efficient than outside.
Oh yeah.
And then two, our new feature about like extending the cooldown. I do that in some of the hard rides. You just give yourself 15, 30 minutes. You do 15 extra minutes over 6 months. That starts to add up a lot. And you're doing it on tired legs. Usually at the end of the workout, you sit into aerobic. Chad, we've talked about this. That's good.
Yeah,
right?
That's heaping a stimulus on top of the stimulus you already achieved with the bulk of the workout.
And hopefully not doing so excessively.
And, a low intensity stimulus at that. So you just, we've talked about ratcheting up TSS, and that's a really safe way to do it and surprisingly effective.
Yeah. Now, the other side of this too is if you are the sort of person that's only able to ride outside or only wants to ride outside, now you can actually, you don't have the excuse of, I don't have structure now. Because if you use TrainerRoad, you can have your workouts outside, so then you can get your quality in, and kind of how you talked about with adding on extra, you get in your quality workout outside, then you have your commute back to your house or back to your office or wherever else, and that can kind of be your extra.
You lost short track by 6 seconds, the podium, because it goes 5 deep. Did you wax your chain?
I did use wax. I used squirt, but I didn't do that.
You didn't wax your chain. There's 6 seconds right there, folks. I know you've had mixed results with it on mountain biking.
Yeah.
You're probably not as big a fan as I am, but 6 seconds.
My theory on the wax chains and why they don't work quite as well anymore on like the wide range intended drivetrains that we have is that, like at the bike shop, you used to go to the bike shop and when they would show you when your chain needed to be replaced, they would like lift it up in the air and hold it sideways and it would flex. They'd be like, see, this thing flexes way too much. Now chains are made to flex a ton because they're with 1x drivetrains. They have to go. Sure. We're talking about like lateral flex, right? So it has to go all the way down a huge range and then all the way up. And as a result, I think that it's tougher for those chains to, like, you know, since they articulate more, it makes the wax
to retain the wax.
Yeah, not as durable, or it doesn't stay in there quite as much. That's my theory. I have no clue. I could be totally wrong. So
of all the chains I've waxed and waxed a lot, Eagle is the one that it's worked the best for me.
Interesting. And
Which
I've
is
had
crazy.
terrible
And you've had
results.
the terrible, right?
Like,
I know.
And gone through cleaning to the nth degree.
Yeah, I just get noisy chains anytime I wax.
Same. Yeah. So, anyways, on equipment.
I don't either.
Equipment for this one, I had the SB100, the Yeti SB100, and I had my 120 millimeter fork. It did not put me at any sort of disadvantage, and I learned something super interesting on this. So we went to Yeti HQ, and I was talking to them about why they over fork. That's what we call it, over forking your bike.
What does that mean?
So you'll see that most bikes have, all in the Yeti lineup, for example, and this is common across a bunch of other bikes, but just speaking for them, they'll have 100 millimeters in the back and 120 up front.
Got it.
Or 130 in the rear.
Over forking?
150 in the front. Yep.
Sounds funny.
150 in the rear, 170 in the front. Usually it's like plus 20. And everyone says, why do you do that to all of your bikes? Doesn't that make it so that it rides lower in the back, that sort of a thing? And when you look at the trigonometry on the suspension is that the bike as it moves through, it's actually even. And what happens is when you actually go down in your travel, you change the head angle of the bike when you go down into your travel, and then it actually makes it so that your bike front and back are actually moving down in the same place. So 120 up front and 100 in the rear, it actually means that your bike moves down front and rear.
So they look at it while it's weighted rather than just sitting there.
Which makes a whole lot of sense because when we ride, it's weighted, right? So, it was awesome. The bike setup was perfect. Thinking of the specific things that I did, I had the roots there. So the roots threw me off a bit with my suspension setup. We don't really have roots here. No. So first thing that I did was on that fork that I have, the MRP ribbon, I can change the positive and negative pressure independently. Nerd warning here for suspension stuff, but I can change it Nate's just leaning back. I can change that independently, and if you add more negative pressure, that means that your fork is going to be sucked down more. It's going to be more plush, right? So I wanted to make my fork more plush was the goal. A lot of the time, the way people would do this with a different fork is you just add in a slightly less compression or less pressure. But then I slowed down my rebound a bunch. And the way you slow down your rebound is you move the red dial on your suspension toward the plus in most cases because you're adding rebound damping. You're slowing it down, its return coming back.
Got it.
And it made it so that my bike stayed way more, like if I was to go over roots, my bike stayed flat. And the suspension wasn't bouncing me around quite as much. And it helped me carry so much momentum through those sections without excessive fatigue in my body from trying to manage a bike that's bouncing around. And it made it so that I could go through one section in particular with a line that only a couple other people were doing. And it was absolutely easy. And for other people, it was really difficult because their tires would be bouncing all over the place. But it was really smooth.
I've been that guy.
Yeah. So it helps. It helps a ton.
I know nothing about suspension.
Don't be afraid to dial things in. I went 4 clicks in on my rebound to make it slower. So front and rear. So anyways, that really helped. And then on the pacing side of things, I basically looked at it and I figured my threshold was around 270, 275 up at that elevation.
Well, what would it be at sea level?
It would have been in somewhere around 310 to 315.
Okay.
So once again, really high. And I looked at that and I basically thought if I stick somewhere between, because the climb is about 8 minutes, not long, 9 minutes long every lap, actually probably closer to 10. And I basically thought, okay, well, that's not an hour, so I can go over my threshold at that. I just don't want to go too far over my threshold because that elevation is really hard to recover. So I thought, stay within 270 to 290 on the climbs. That's what I tried to do. And then on those surgy sections, since I stayed within myself, I was still able to let the power go up there, to keep my momentum up, to not slow down every time it got steep. And I could still recover. And I feel like I was walking that knife's edge, and it's so hard up there because you just go slightly too far, and then you're completely over the edge and you can't recover. But I feel like it was a good tactic. And every race that I saw won by somebody, they did the same tactic. They stayed within themselves, and they didn't go too hard too soon.
Probably because they're more fit.
Yeah, well, yes. For some people that makes a win, and for some people it gets them a ninth.
How many laps did you do?
It's a good strategy. 4 laps.
And how'd your lap splits stack up?
Almost evenly. I think that I had the first lap was faster because we went out harder.
Sure.
I still stayed within myself and just watched the front group walk away. It was hard, but I stuck to my strategy, and I think it paid off because I just picked people off for the rest.
Okay.
But laps 2, 3, and 4, I think the spread was 25 seconds in lap time. So that's pretty close.
And laps were how long?
They were, time-wise?
Time-wise?
Yeah, I think that they were somewhere around 24 to 25 minutes.
Huh.
So pretty long for ex-CEO normally. So
that's well paced.
But yeah, interesting stuff. And then for nutrition, I had bottles pre-mixed with gels taped onto the bottles. I had a small amount of Marten, like I basically mixed it all, then I diluted it in bottles. Just then, if I was drinking something, I wanted to have water because I was taking in gels too. And I like that for XCO. For marathon stuff, I like drinking it. But for XCO, I wanted to have that.
2 bottles on the bike?
Only one bottle on the bike, and then my wife had a bottle for me in the feed zone every time. Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome. So I would just grab that, and actually on the last 2 laps, I grabbed it and I drank as much as I could. Then I just threw the bottle down. I took off the gels, drank it. I didn't carry it with me. There was no need to, right? So that's another thing you can do in XCO. If it was shorter laps than this, I would have never carried a bottle. I would have just grabbed them in the feed zone, drank as much as I could, and then ridden without that extra 3 pounds, for the bottle. Yeah. So it's a little hack.
College was useful. Good of a skill.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. Drinking things quickly. I see where you're going with that.
I got you.
So
a little slow, but I got there.
Like a Gatorade bong.
One quick thing. Yeah, exactly. One quick thing that I want to add into this is something interesting. I got the Garmin Forerunner 945 before I went up for here, and it does pulse ox, or SpO2 is what it does. And it was interesting to see, and I know that everyone that knows about this stuff is going to say, well, duh, that's exactly how it's supposed to work. But it's interesting to have the numbers to it. As I went up in elevation, my blood oxygen saturation went down. And it was, usually they say 95 to 100 is where you want to be. That's typical.
Yeah.
And I find that I actually sit somewhere around 96 usually, 97-ish at our elevation of 5,000 feet. But up there, I was low. Once I got up in elevation, every day it started going lower and lower. So you'll remember before this, I thought, I'm going to go up a few days beforehand. I'm fine. It's not going to affect me. And while true, relatively speaking, it probably doesn't affect me worse than somebody else. It absolutely affected me, and this put data to it. Because I was able to see that every day it started trickling down so that I was at 86 at a resting level rather than up at 96.
Did you happen to notice when it started to trend back up? Or were you on your way?
Once I got out of there. But I was up there 4 days, and for the 4 days, it kept trickling down. Days. It never started going back up. So it's just an interesting thing to show that even though you may not feel like you're being affected adversely, your body still is being affected adversely. And the other interesting thing is during the racing was when it was highest, relatively speaking, during that time frame, which makes sense because you're warming up the blood, hemoglobin, all that stuff, oxygen throughout the body.
Great job, dude.
Thank you.
I want to see what it does at Leadville. Because that's in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Are we doing a podcast next week?
We don't have one on the cards, but it really depends on your schedule next week.
Okay.
So we'll cover that. Yeah. If we don't, we'll probably have a special episode that we'll record at some point up there with somebody. So stay tuned for that. But we have a few things kind of sitting on reserve. But anyways, yeah, interesting stuff. And with Leadville, can we just jump into that really quick?
Let's do it.
On a few things. So we're going up the day of. Especially with the data that we have. We were planning on doing that without the data beforehand. Just going up the day of. So number pickup, going straight back down to Golden, staying in Golden.
Proper.
And then going up in the morning, waking up at 3:30 and
not proper.
Not proper.
I have this feeling we're going to be in a line of traffic, and you're just going to get out of on your bike and just ride
make Leadville 120 miles instead of 103. Why not, right? So a couple things. I broke down my nutrition. We'll put this spreadsheet, Tucker, producer Tucker. We'll put this spreadsheet into the forum too, that I have here. I'll have to make it public for everybody, but it's very nerdy. But hopefully this can help you kind of get an idea of how everything works and how you break down and plan for your nutrition that you have for a race. And I basically have it planned out for every aid station, what I'm going to take in and everything else. And it basically averages out to 99 grams per hour of carbohydrate if I take everything in. Granted, I'll probably get there and I won't have drank every part of my reservoir, but I'm okay with that. That's over the 90 grams per hour. If I can keep up with 99 grams an hour the whole entire race, good job me. I feel like that's really
thorough.
That would be great. Yeah. The crazy thing is, though, I want to cover this for people, the cost. So this is all like, once again, like we talked about in a previous episode, I found that Marten really works for me, and I don't want to throw away a bad day. So I'm going to use this stuff. But boy, is it expensive. So if you look at this, it breaks down to $16.48 an hour. That's expensive gas in a car.
You're paying to race. You're definitely not getting paid to race.
That's expensive gas in a car.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh. So it's really expensive, but I'll be taking in a total of 17 gels over the race. which that probably sounds like a ton to people, but if you try these gels, you'll know that it's not like taking in 17 normal gels.
7 or 8 hours too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
746.
Is that what you're?
That's what I'm calling.
Yeah.
Do you have a time you're gonna call?
No. I trust that you've done the homework. So
there's no homework. I just guess.
This is you're just guessing. Oh, I thought you were basing this on BBS or something.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I'll go 7:32.
Whoa, thank you, Chad. Best bike split says 8:07, so we'll see. But that one's always tricky because it's not made for mountain biking, right? Yeah. So it's tricky to tell.
And you're going to be pack riding and stuff like that too.
Oh yeah,
which they don't know.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, I think I'll be taking in, it's like 19 packets of mix as well. So that's a lot.
Do you want to have any backup food at these aid? Because I'm going to be at one of the aid stations because if just hearing
I see
that,
what you mean.
You might get fatigued and be like, I need some potato chips. Or
yeah,
like,
I see what you mean.
That. Yeah, just get completely
just
burnt.
Something totally different.
Yeah, so
like
we'll have potato chips for sure. That's like my thing that I like to have there.
I might eat them all. I'm going to be sitting there for like 6 hours.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He doesn't do well when he's left alone with a bag of chips.
Yeah.
Saw that on Mauna Kea.
I ate a whole large size of
Maui Wowies, right?
Yeah, Maui Wowies.
Yeah, cleaned them out. So yeah, I don't know. I'll probably have that. I'll also have some fruit, like just because an apple sometimes sounds so good deep into a ride, and I know that it's not good for you. It has fiber, all that stuff. But
what about like something savory, like a Wonder Bread peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Oh yeah, sounds great. Peanut butter and jelly.
You just prep it all.
Yeah, I'll have it all prepped.
Yeah.
And we'll go over Leadville in more detail later in terms of like what we'll do there. But just some equipment things really quick that I'm going to do. Oh, one other thing on nutrition. I'm going to carry, get ready to drink. Keegan gave me this tip, but he carries ginger, like the dried ginger that you can get that's kind of like candied ginger almost.
Okay, candied.
Yeah, and he carries that in his pocket for cramps. And I tried it, and it actually works very well. Kind of like when you have that cramp moment. You know, people use pickle juice or whatever else.
Throw it on the pile.
It's
we'll
so
have to
much
bring that to Kona for Chad.
It's so much easier than carrying around
I don't cramp anymore.
That like a
ride big rides.
I was just going to say that very thing, but I do, and I've been riding pretty consistently, and
it's true.
And even on our later season stuff. They were long days, and
you were good with it.
I got
it
all worked doing
out.
Secret training.
Stop
putting on Strava.
Rocky training over here.
I'm about to.
So it's just easier than carrying like mustard packets or pickle juice or something like that because you can just toss it in your pocket and it's nice and easy, and it's just a strong flavor to try to help. I haven't had a lot of issues with cramping, but definitely that's a day to bring it out if there's any. So some equipment, I'm maybe making a gamble with my tires. I'm not going to use Aspens. I'm going to use tires that are discontinued by Maxxis now. They're hard to get. Called the Maxxis Tread Lights.
That is totally a gamble for sidewall cuts.
So it's not Max Lights. They're Tread Lights. So they're different.
Okay.
Max Lights definitely are a gamble.
Do they have EXO?
Yes. But I'm going to have 2 EXO and then 1 non-EXO. So I'm thinking of running the non-EXO on the front. Yeah. Double protection. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking I'm going to go non-EXO in the front, which EXO is like their sidewall protection. And then I'll go with sidewall protection in the rear, just because usually you can be more choosy about where you put your front. We'll see. It might be a bad idea. We'll test this out beforehand.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm going to increase the negative pressure.
I just want to talk about this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like goals. So let's say the no EXO protection, you go instead of 746, you go 739.
Yeah.
Is anything going to change in your life?
No.
What if on the power, like on Sugarloaf on the way down, like on the way back, you're 6 hours in, you get a sidewall cut. Your day is done.
Yeah.
You got to come back and do it again.
No, I won't. Yeah, this is one and done, famously saying right now.
You could have a sidewall cut going down power line, like the very beginning. Then you'd probably be happy 2 hours in.
It could happen.
We just go right back home.
You're sticking to that tire choice then?
Oh, I don't know. We'll see.
Right now.
I'm going to test out. Yeah, I'm going to test out what it's like and see if there's any advantage.
What is your goal?
Next 2 weeks?
My goal is to get this done. So here's the interesting thing with Leadville. I'm sorry for all those that are romantic about Leadville. I don't hold the same romance. For me, when I see a 6-hour time, I don't think that would be an amazing result. I think that's great because it would be done earlier than 7 hours. So that's kind of like my perspective.
Much how I approach all of those. The sooner I get it done, the better.
Yeah. Having a really light tire, though, you might get done really soon. So
that's what I'm thinking about.
It would just be a bummer not to be able to finish.
I agree with that.
And
wholeheartedly.
It's not going to really change your. I mean, if you're going for 9 and like you've done 9:05 before, I understand the gamble. Yeah. But I don't understand the gamble with you.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll probably end up running EXO and EXO, front and rear.
DHF.
We'll see. Not doing that. And I'm going to be running plus 10% negative pressure, basically making my fork more plush because I want to take off every edge of every bump. When you're talking about 100 miles, that's a lot of small bumps and they add up.
Fair.
I'm not carrying bottles in my pockets in my skin suit because I've done that recently and I found that it causes some discomfort with my back. Like it's like small thing that it always presses on your back and then it makes your back go nuts throughout the rest of the race, you know? So I'm not going to do that. I'm carrying a Dynaplug inflator tool. It's like a tire plug tool that also, as soon as the plug goes in and you pull out, it inflates your tire with the CO2. Yeah. And a backcountry research strap, that's what it's called, but it'll have a tube and a boot. So that way, if I do get a flat, I'll be able to fix it. I'm going to be wearing the 2-in-1 skin suit. I don't think I'm going to go vented because the non-vented one is still plenty cool, and it's still vented as far as most things go.
I think it wasn't a particularly hot day either.
No, but Nate cooked at the end.
It was so hot.
Yeah, at the end.
No, it was a hot day.
It gets hot.
Oh, that's right. At the end it was.
You have to know, you probably already know this, but you're going to have like cold weather gear stashed up on Columbine because they could get between 30 and 40 degrees up
Crazy
there.
cold. If thunderstorms roll in.
Yeah.
Thunderstorms roll in, it completely changes everything.
Oh, yeah, it could be raining and cold up there.
And we had thunderstorms every single day at Winter Park, basically, that were pretty crazy. So, it can happen. And then I'm going to use I think I'm just going to use the ventral instead of the ventral air. That's the POC helmet that I have.
You want to do the helmet switch?
I don't think so because I've noticed that with the ventral, so the ventral air, it has a bunch of holes. The ventral just has a few holes in the front and then in the back. I found that it pulls air over your head with more pressure when it doesn't have the holes on top. So I feel like it's actually better at venting unless you're going really slow. So I'm still going to bring the ventral air because at the end, if I'm getting hot, I'll probably switch to it for when I'm climbing back up at the end from the final aid station. So anywho, that's all the Leadville stuff. We'll see how that goes. If I get a flat,
We're going to talk pacing.
Oh, yeah, pacing. I'm going to try to basically, if I look at it, 185 watts normalized power for the whole time would be great. It just sounds crazy, right? Because that's like
so boring.
So yeah, I know. But I figured that's what I'll probably work down to. Somewhere between there and 200 watts is where I think I'll need to be.
That includes descending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
here's the most important part is what's the power target on the climbs? Because that is really the number.
Yeah. 230. But the thing is, you can't stay within that at all points on those climbs. You have to go over at times. Right, Nate?
No.
You've done it before.
Really?
Well, what's your front chain
Even with the elevation changes
32.
on the climbs?
I'll be fine there.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You can do 230, I bet.
Okay. Yeah. So, So, anyways, that's the
except on power line. That's the one.
You have to go over there.
I was going 380 watts and slipping.
Yeah, because it's
like
steep.
falling over. Yep.
Yeah, it's steep. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, that's the plan. When I can control it, that's where I'll be. And when I mean control it, it's not about staying with other people. It's about just staying upright
for an overall 7 to 8 hour 0.75 intensity factor.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Chad? I think it's a little high.
Yeah, it sounds a little high, but optimistic, perhaps.
We'll
if you're going to do a 732, probably going to have to be 0.75. So
that's right. Okay, got it. Yeah, I'll do it and think of you, Chad. So, with that, let's get into some other stuff here. So, one thing that we've had, so we get questions on this pretty regularly about people wondering basically like, hey, like I've done a VO2 Max test and I have a number now, like what do I do with it, right? Or how do I figure this out? Am I stuck at this forever? That was another thing that we've talked about and a lot of people question, like basically, am I just always going to be 68?
That's just been a fact. In the endurance world.
Air quotes fact.
Yeah, well, it's been a fact like anything else is a fact. Like lactate is poison used to be a fact.
Yeah.
So. This is what I've always heard is that your VO2 max is what it is. You can change your body composition, but like how much you can take in is what it is. But you can train your power at VO2 max.
Yeah, that's like been the common consensus.
And I'm as guilty as anybody for perpetuating that belief because that's the information I had and that's the information I rolled with. But anecdotally, I've seen evidence otherwise, and there's science surfacing on a pretty regular basis that demonstrates that as well. Longtime coaches are starting to post that I've seen, and I'll get into one particular coach in a little bit, but it's some inaccurate information.
So VO2 Max isn't static. It isn't stuck.
Very much not.
It's interesting, right?
And there are a few cases. I'll explain what those cases are. So let's just, right out of the gates, VO2 Max is trainable. That's where I'm going with this entire discussion. Mm-hmm. So VO2 Max is synonymous with aerobic capacity. So you just basically your maximum level of O2 consumption, the upper limit of your aerobic ATP production. So how much energy can I make aerobically. We've talked a number of times about power at VO2 max, and then there's velocity of VO2 max for runners. Speed of VO2 max is sometimes used. And those, that basically you're just opening up a debate there, because it's really tough to put a single power on VO2 max because it has to be tied to duration. Yep. Anytime you're above threshold, you can achieve VO2 max eventually. You can do it really quick if you gas it. You can do it over a greater length of time if you ease up a bit and you're riding just slightly over FTP. But the fact is, if you're above FTP, if you're above that steady state metabolic platform, so to speak, you'll eventually get there.
That's like the end of a time trial when you think you're at threshold, but it's not threshold. Yeah. In the end, you're like,
yeah, that's not threshold breathing.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's some terms like you'll probably hear fractional utilization, and that's, I mean, if you do any reading at all, and that's just the percentage of VO2 max you're working at. So what we want, and this is especially in the context of FTP, we want a high fractional utilization. We want to work at a high percentage of our VO2 max when we're at FTP. We want to employ as much of our aerobic resources as possible.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So I look at this more in terms of volume of uptake. So just VO2. Who cares about max? I mean, max is useful if you want to go into a lab and measure it. It has its utility, don't get me wrong, but really we're just looking at VO2, or more generally aerobic fitness. That's all we're talking about here. How much can I do aerobically? So I wanted to briefly trace the path of oxygen, so just so we understand maybe why they say it's not trainable, but each of these spots along the way targets why it is possible, how we can affect all of these things, and therefore we can improve aerobic capacity in the process.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because just a couple weeks ago we talked about glycogen and how that gets converted into energy. So this is kind of running in parallel.
And that's the idea.
Into your lungs and then into your legs.
yeah, simplistically, that's fast.
Thank you, Nate.
Description, but yeah, via blood. Yep,
it really does.
Yes, it's true.
It is true. It is true. Okay, but we're going to take I limited it to 4 steps. Cool. So path of oxygen, your mouth and your nose are basically your inlet, your intake. So it's pretty straightforward. Comes into the mouth, comes into the nose, makes its way down to your lungs, heart, and blood. So past the intake point, this is where the exchange occurs. And this is where we talk about respiratory exchange ratios and all the stuff that happens with O2 in, CO2 out. So that's where the exchange takes place. And then the blood vessels themselves, you're into the heart at this point. Blood comes into the lungs, it's oxygenated, it's pushed out through particular blood vessels. These blood vessels get smaller and smaller until eventually they work down to the muscle level, where they reach the capillary beds. So these are the finest blood vessels we have within the muscles, and this is where all the exchange of everything occurs. This is where we dump off oxygen, pick up waste, clear lactate, all that stuff takes place at this level. So capillaries and capillarization, depending on if you're Canadian or American or English or British, capillarization is one thing we can absolutely influence, and in doing so, we improve our ability to facilitate this exchange, to deliver more oxygen to the muscle, to clear more waste, et cetera.
So that's evidence of the fact that it could be trainable. Could be
yes.
improved.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the most common adaptations to endurance training is increased capillarization. So that's basically the delivery. The blood vessels are responsible for the delivery. And then at the muscle, this is where the actual uptake or the consumption, what we're measuring when we measure VO2 max, or really any level of uptake, this is where it occurs, and specifically in the mitochondria. So harken back to a couple weeks ago when we talked about cell respiration, we talked about how it's in the mitochondria that the aerobic end of respiration takes place, and that's where we generate the biggest bang for our buck in terms of energy in, ATP out.
Got it.
Or substrate in, ATP out. So with that in mind, what determines VO2 max? First off, there's cardiac output. So we go back up to the lungs and the heart, and we can look at a couple things. And one is stroke volume. How much blood does our heart push out with every contraction? And that is basically tied to the left ventricle. We don't really have to get that specific, but just know that you can, with training, influence how much blood your heart can pump with each contraction.
That is where it's often the question. My heart rate went down for is that a good thing or a bad thing, my max heart rate? And it can be, it's the volume, stroke volume rather than rate.
Yeah, and that's what happens.
Together.
You're actually getting fitter and you can do more work, but your heart rate declined. What happened? Well, your heart got more capable of pushing more blood per beat.
For gearheads, it's like bore and stroke of a motor. There are two different things that determine what it can make power. Exactly. It's not just heart rate, right?
And improvements in cardiac output, so your stroke volume, and then of course the other end of that is heart rate, how many times your heart beats. Improvements in cardiac output of pretty much been attributed over the years to high volume, low intensity training. The only way you're going to bump that up is by doing the long miles and doing it consistently. Well, but Paul Larson, Martin Buchheit have pointed out that you can achieve improvements in cardiac output through high intensity training as well. And it's about manipulating recovery intervals and the structure of the intervals. But you can get absolutely in the weeds, but this is what I do, and this is what these workouts do for you, whether you understand this or not.
Yeah, it works.
So you can affect cardiac output both with long, slow distance and with high intensity training is the takeaway. Another thing that determines VO2 max is your oxygen carrying capacity. So you think of basically your hemoglobin content, and that's another thing that we can influence with training. The affinity for oxygen, which you experienced when you went up to elevation, and the affinity rose, and your blood simply wasn't letting go of the oxygen the way it usually does.
Yep.
And then, of course, your red blood cell count through training, through altitude exposure and certain other, I think. Do we attribute that to sauna training? No, that's plasma volume.
Yeah.
But anyway, we can change we can improve our red blood cell content, which means we mess with our hematocrit. We change the plasma, we mess with our hematocrit. So our concentration changes. But if we have more red blood cells, it's a win. We can carry more oxygen, we can deliver more oxygen, we can do more work aerobically.
That is why the people took EPO.
Back in the day. That's exactly why.
There we go.
Yep. The people.
Back in the day. Never these days. Yeah.
Okay, and then another thing that determines VO2 max are, in surprise to nobody, muscle characteristics. And within the muscle itself, we're talking about the capillaries that I just talked about. We're talking about the enzymes, in particular aerobic enzymes, PDH, LDH. These things also increase with endurance training. And then fiber type plays into it too. If you think about the fiber continuum, the slow twitch all the way to the fast twitch, you've got your slow oxidative, you got your slow oxidative glycolytic, where we kind of get to those type 2A fibers, but still oxidative, and then your fast oxidative glycolytic, still the type 2As. But the fact is, 3 different fiber types along that continuum all have oxidative capacity, and even our fast twitch have oxidative capacity to some extent too. So the fibers definitely play into it, and the more slow twitch you are, the easier it is, or not, the more likely, I guess I'll say easier, to bring your FTP to a higher percentage of your VO2 max because you're a more aerobically inclined athlete.
Yeah.
And then the mitochondria. I mean, this is really what it boils down to is our mitochondria. And mitochondria, both in terms of their quantity and, in quotes, quality. So quantity, again, has been something that if you want to increase mitochondrial proliferation, you want more of these little energy factories in your cells, in your muscles, long, slow distance. But over the years, we've discovered high intensity training, sprint intensity training. So many things can also improve, maybe not to the same extent, but can also improve the proliferation. And then the quality, this is what's typically attributable to high intensity training. If you want to improve the function of your mitochondria, how well they work, how much energy they can extract for every bit of oxygen that goes in, that's largely attributed to high intensity training.
Yep.
So, but there's
who cares how many you have? They aren't working efficiently. Right?
Well, yeah, they have to be healthy mitochondria, and that extends to every aspect of life. If you don't have healthy mitochondria, you're going to suffer in more ways than your endurance performance.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, so with all that in mind, just look at some examples. And if you've heard of Oscar Svensson, he was a kid, in pretty recent memory, who set the basic upper limit of VO2 max. He didn't, they say, eclipsed Bjorn Dahli's 96 VO2 max when he went 96.7. I don't necessarily consider that eclipsing. He definitely beat it. But he's an interesting case, and he is the high end of things. So, we can only make so much of this, and he's one person too, but I'll talk about other cyclists as well, or other athletes as well. So at 15, he came in untrained with a 74.6. Now, VO2 max is measured either relative to body weight or absolute. When we measure it relative to body weight, that's milliliters per kilogram of body weight per minute. So with that aside, just know he's at 74. That's already very high. So untrained, he's got a 74 VO2 max. A lot of people will train years and years and years.
Never get there.
And never touch that.
Most masters racers aren't there.
Yep. It's a sad truth.
Highly trained.
Although, is it a truth? We'll see. So 6 months worth of training, he elevated that to 83.4. Another year of training, 86.8. So he's ticking up. But then another year, obviously some training alteration. I don't know. They didn't specify exactly what. This is when he pulled the 96.7. So reestablished the records. And of course, they questioned the machinery, recalibrated the machinery, tested other athletes to confirm, and indeed 96.7 was was the stat. Later that same year, he dropped to 92.8, and that's what a lot of people throw around. They say, oh, 96.7 wasn't accurate, it was 92.8. Well, in fact, it was accurate. He actually added a little bit of weight, and if you look at his absolute VO2 max, it went from 7.397 down to 7.307.
And that's a big point to take away on this, is that he didn't just lose weight the whole time to raise it.
Nope. In fact, yeah, the weight was a small, if even, maybe not even an important aspect of this. Then takes 15 months off, decides I don't want to be a cyclist, I don't like the pressure, I don't like whatever. He didn't like it. He moved on. 15 months of doing not a whole lot of anything, it declined back to 77. It returned back to where he was. But what's the takeaway here is this kid went from a 77 up to a 97 back to a 77, thereabouts. That's a massive change. And in terms of percentage, that's huge. And body weight wasn't a big contributor to that ratio. They looked at relative, they looked at absolute. Kid's got a big margin.
Yeah.
But again, he's just one example.
So that's why we just talked about it. You are detrained right now, and you've fallen from grace very far.
Taking a break. Long break.
But that's what I'm saying. The same. What was it, like a 20-point swing?
Yeah.
Right. That's insane.
Yeah. 20 mils per mil kg mins.
Is it liters or mils? Liters per
milliliters when you do
per
it
kilogram
relative to body
per
weight,
hour.
and then liters when you do it absolute. And when you're looking at big numbers in terms of absolute VO2 max, you're looking in the 7s. So 7 liters a minute, that's an enormous aerobic engine.
Wow. So proof that it was trainable within this
bit of evidence, and in this kid's case, which you could say that kid's an outlier. So he just has a very trainable VO2 max. But Ronestad and Hansen published a study last year, 2018. Came across it again the other day, and it reminded me that it also, in this case, they dealt with a single elite athlete. So again, we're talking about one, but I'm gonna get into the bigger numbers later, the more applicable numbers later. They had 10 years of testing data on this particular athlete, and his VO2 max hovered between 65 and 76.5. So we're talking like a 10 mil per kilogram per minute margin. So 65 to 75. That already is outside of what they say is what's capable, 5 to 15%. That's been the statistic over time. Is at best you can maybe bump your VO2 max up 15%, and that's probably from an untrained state. This guy in particular, and I tried really hard to find out who this cyclist was, but I couldn't. Was training about 10 hours a week, so not a huge training load, but
more than you.
Yeah, but in doing so, exhibited a 20% change in VO2 max, just training 10 hours a week. I don't care what he was doing. It was only 10 hours a week. And you can bet it wasn't all intervals. No one can do 10 hours of intervals a week. So what they did with this cyclist, after 10 years, was subjected him to 58 weeks of a different training intervention. And it's not really important what that intervention is, so much as to say that they changed his training. In the process, they elevated his training load about 3 hours a week. Obviously, the composition of it changed. Well, not obviously, it did. The composition of the training itself changed also. Now the guy's 37 years old. VO2 max, 87. He pushed it up to 87 simply by changing things, adding on average 3 hours a week and going with a different training method.
Interesting.
And it was still a varied training method, might I add. Not a polarized approach, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
It was a mix. I think you said it was a mix.
It was a pretty even mix between low intensity, mid intensity, and high intensity training.
Threshold,
and
sweet
a
spot.
Pretty healthy mix of them all.
Yeah.
Leaning heavily toward the low intensity side of things, but still with a hefty dose,
like that.
Hefty dose of threshold sweet spot work, hefty dose of high intensity interval training.
That's a good segue, or a good thing I want to say is that, I don't know how to say it. If you want to get to 13 hours a week and you're on our high volume training plans, because there's around 8 or 9, Chad, what can you add? Can I add more intervals? We talked about it earlier.
Typically not. I mean, you know if you can, but that's a delicate balance. And as soon as you push yourself to the other side, as soon as that scale drops to the unfavorable side, you know it, and it can be a tough road back.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely a training interruption.
So what do we add?
So why not err on the side of caution and just do it with more volume, more low intensity volume? And you can do it in so many ways. And Nate demonstrated or talked about one of those ways, which is just tacking on a longer cool down at the end of a workout. 15 minutes over, say you do it 4 times in a week, that's an extra hour of volume, and you really didn't cut into anything else. You're already on the bike, you just tacked on another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Voila, a whole extra hour.
You got to think of like who doesn't, like when you get off the bike. I don't know. I always waste 15 minutes.
Oh yeah.
I go on Strava, like
100%.
Yeah. Just don't go on Strava.
I may still be sitting on the bike.
I love Strava.
Looking at my phone, reading, just not turning the pedals. Why not turn the pedals?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. I'm doing these morning 30-minute ones, trying to get extra volume, and I literally would sit in bed for 30 minutes and like check like work stuff. Now I can just do it on the bike as I turn the pedals.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so really, let me just tidy up this this elite cyclist that we're talking about. So this was basically an 18.5% increase in VO2 max relative to his body weight. Turns out, lost a little bit of body weight, so that skews that number a bit. So if we look at absolute, he still saw a 12% increase. He's been doing this for 10 years, hovering in a pretty narrow range, and now he's bumped his VO2 max up 12.3% absolute at 37 years of age.
Further evidence.
Further evidence.
It's funny because you hear this a lot, especially like when you hear about like Grand Tour riders and that sort of stuff, and they go, oh yeah, that rider has a high VO2 max, so thusly he's like, he's destined for greatness.
Yeah, and
that rider has a low one, he's capped, he's never going to be.
That's what we thought, and it was...
Sure, some people have more genetic predisposition to be able to reach higher heights than others.
There is a huge genetic component. There is.
But it doesn't mean that
it's not as limiting as we thought it was.
Exactly.
Is what we're finding.
100%.
Is what they're finding. And
interesting, Chad.
What I'm finding. Okay, so another guy, Falk Hansen, he's a PhD. He's basically the master of glycogen in general, glycogen metabolism. Or
the master of
glucose
glycogen.
Metabolism. Dude's PhD in that particular thing, so he knows a whole lot about it.
Totally does something.
But what he pointed out, what was very interesting to me is now we're talking the old end of things. And typically I'll say masters athletes or veteran athletes. We're talking old, just old in this case. This dude's 101 years old.
Okay, that is old.
That's
I
old.
thought you were going to be like something offensive.
55. No, 101 years old. 101 years old. This guy starts with a 30 VO2 max, which at 100 years old, no, that sounds about right. Okay. Decides he's going to do a world hour record attempt. So he trains for 2 years,
So cool.
logs 5,000 kilometers a year. That's not a lot. That's 1,000 kilometers per week on average.
100 kilometers.
I'm sorry, 100.
1,000
is a lot.
Whoa.
100 kilometers
years
a week.
old.
So we're talking 60 kilometers a week. And the fact that they put it in kilometers per week tells me he might just be riding. Might not be doing intervals, might not be doing specific training. But over the course of these 2 years, doing 5,000 K per year, elevated his his VO2 max at 101 years of age, 13%.
There you go.
That's a big jump at 100.
That'd be the most scary thing ever to like like prescribe training for a 101-year-old. That'd be like pressure on the pedals.
That's probably why he did. Just go ride. Just go ride, and when you're tired, come home.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, amazing,
Okay,
man.
so last but not least, Alan Cousins, it's probably pronounced Cousins, longtime endurance coach of triathletes. He's a very reputable coach. Man knows his stuff. He was working with, in particular, a youngish mid-pack triathlete who is at a perpetual plateau. And we've all been there. We figure, my FTP gets this high and it just doesn't go any higher. I'm here to tell you that is absolutely not the case in most cases, and I'll describe why momentarily. He had a 53 VO2 max, and he wanted to qualify for Kona World Championships. And, most coaches would just say, sorry, buddy, it's not happening.
Right.
Because even at 53, if you can achieve a 10% bump, we're looking at, the whole 5 to 15% range that has been touted up until now, that gets him, maybe a 58 VO2 max? That's still not going to put you at a place where you're probably qualifying for Kona. So what does he do? And this is a 3-year timeline. So he trained with, and Cousins' approach in this case was simply to elevate long, slow distance. So he had him do it from the low end. Low intensity training over the course of 3 years, pushed a 53 VO2 max to 74.
There you go.
That puts him up into the elites. That's an impressive VO2 max, and he did qualify for Kona. And his trajectory went from a 53 to a 64 to a 71. So each year, that's already super motivating. And he continued it to elevate even slightly beyond that to the 74.6, and in the process qualified for Kona, and showed that even though he looked like a very maybe sub-average endurance athlete, pushed himself to the point of elite.
And it wasn't just body composition changes?
Not in this case. No, and he did provide the body weight. I'm sure there was, but the absolute, in fact.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I didn't note that.
Okay.
I didn't note that. But if you go to, I can't think of what Cousins' website is.
Maybe if someone has a question in the forum, we can look at it later.
Yeah, we can link to this exact post too.
Yeah.
But what Cousins has noticed over the years, and he's coached a lot of endurance athletes, a lot of triathletes, is that 5 to 15% is some nonsense, and on average, he sees something more in the range of 25%. He sees athletes come in, start here, finish at doing it right, 25%. And the key to this is the right training, done for a sufficient amount of time. And that's what most of the studies that say VO2 max isn't trainable, it's genetically predetermined, you can't, you're stuck with what you're stuck with, don't take into account. They try one training alteration, they do it for one block of time, and typically it's a pretty short block of time. And of course, there's not a big change, if there's a change at all, in VO2 max. But you do the right type of training and you do it long enough and you see big changes in your aerobic capacity.
I feel for the people with studies too, is they don't have the money or probably the subjects that are motivated enough to be like, we're going to go for 3 years, people.
Yep.
And you're going to do this training plan.
Nobody wants to look at a 3-year timeline anyway. They want to be fast now.
Yep.
So they're alterations. But to that end, you can achieve, in fact, I did note that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Cousins points this out, that on average, he sees about a 24% increase if they go the high volume, low intensity approach. But we're talking 15, 18, 20 hours a week in order to do this. And we're also talking numerous years in a row. Approach it from the other end of things, and you go a short-term 4 to 6 week VO2 max block, or just, a couple days of VO2 max within your week, and you can still see, and he sees on average about 16%.
Yeah.
So just from a 4 to 6 week training intervention, doing high intensity work, big bump in VO2 max.
Sounds like our build or specialty.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Lots
It
of
works.
It's a method to my madness, to our madness. Okay, so some takeaways that I'd like to
Don't include us in your madness, Chad.
madness. So some takeaways. First off, when you're maxed out, genetically through training, you probably are up against that ceiling. But how many of us are maxed out?
Oh, yeah, I feel like so few of us.
So few.
Yeah.
And then which is to say the VO2 improvements can be achieved at almost all levels. It doesn't matter if you're elite already and you think you can't push it any higher, you probably can. If you're untrained, obviously you can. And if you're stuck at a plateau, probably can. You just need to change things up. And again, there are numerous ways to go about it. We talked about low intensity, high volume, mid intensity, sweet spot, and endurance threshold type stuff. High intensity training like VO2 max, quote, intervals, sprint intensity training, 30-second efforts. All of these things can have a positive influence on your aerobic capacity. And finally, the single takeaway is simply that physiology and even genetics do not necessarily equate to destiny. You can influence both your FTP, obviously, which we know is highly trainable, and your VO2 max, which brings me to the final point that we're always concerned with. When we hit that plateau, we think that's it. That's all the higher my FTP goes. And they say, go back and I need to work on your VO2 max, but I can't elevate VO2 max. Well, now you know you can. So if you're paying attention to these two things, and you don't necessarily have to measure VO2 max, you don't have to measure, we all measure FTP, but to know the margin between them. You can look at, what's my best 4, 5, maybe 6 minute power, and how does that compare to my threshold power? When that margin gets really narrow, you've got to go back and focus on the VO2 max work. If you want to improve performance past that point, you can't simply keep on doing sweet spot work. You can't keep doing low intensity work. You're going to have to find a way to elevate, a different way to elevate.
This is built into our plans, but I get this where I do sweet spot over and over and over again because I enjoy sweet spot and it gets me to be a diesel. But you've mentioned on this podcast,
and that's what sweet spot
I need
does
to jump into
really well.
Build and specialty plans.
Once you've reached a point, sweet spot can just tick that FTP up for a very long time. And then even if you don't want to elevate FTP anymore, but you want to be able to work at a high percentage of FTP or, more accurately, a high percentage of your VO2 max, sweet spot's an awesome way to do it. And in the process, you do garner some aerobic benefits, some aerobic adaptation simply doing sweet spot. There will come a point where it's not going to do any more for you, and you can't just keep on heaping on sweet spot. The body simply can't.
Same can be said for any sort of training.
Exactly. So that's when you have to change the stimulus, and again, you have to do it for an appropriate period of time.
This is why you thought of all this in the plans, right?
It is. Even if I didn't understand exactly these findings, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the basic principles behind it, right? I'd be really interested to see somebody like Matt Lieto, for example. He famously has shared his story about how, like, when the first year, was he at Kona when he was handing up water to somebody at a race or something, and he was trying to run after them to hand them the water, and he said he was fat and slow and couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's right. And they were in the middle of a marathon.
Something like that. In the marathon.
Marathon pace after 112-mile bike in the
sprint.
heat.
It'd be so interesting, right? Because then Matt became, and still is, like an insanely strong athlete.
It'd be cool to see his absolute, because obviously relative.
Yeah,
he would have great improvements. But
it's not always as telling as I'd like it to be, but take a look at your mom. Maybe your mom never exploited her athletic potential, but if you're a good endurance athlete, you got that from your mom. All your mitochondrial DNA comes from your mom's side of things, 100%.
Interesting.
So if you have a stellar endurance athlete of a mother, that definitely weighs in your favor.
Taylor Finney comes to mind.
Yeah, one of many.
Yep. Let's go into Christy's question. Okay. She says, I suffered my first DNF this weekend, and it really crushed me emotionally. I feel for you, Christy. I finished 4th overall at this competitive local race last year, so I was well aware of the suffering the course entailed. I've been racing for years, and I'm typically a very strong rider, so not being able to even soft pedal to the finish line really broke my heart. She pointed out a key thing there of like being aware of the suffering that she was going to be in for. That's like a key thing, for sure.
Yeah, you got to be braced for that.
It was a tough decision to pull the plug 8,000 feet into a 10,000-foot climbing race, but my body just wouldn't cooperate. I have bigger plans this year as I'll be racing in France at the 70.3 Ironman World Championships this September. She says, I DNF'd this weekend knowing that I don't have enough wiggle room to recover from a full blow-up, meaning that if she would have tried to stick it through, she probably would have put herself in a deep hole. Even though I keep telling myself I did the right thing, I'm still disappointed that I quit. I'm wondering how many times you all have willingly taken a DNF, and if you've ever been 100% okay with it after it was too late to take back your decision. Do you use horrendous days like these to fuel your fire to come back stronger?
Yes and yes.
Yeah. So we famously DNF'd 24 hours in the old Pueblo. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
got our fair share of DNF.
Time trial.
The more you race.
Yeah.
No, it's not necessarily a strong correlation between the more you race, the more you DNF. But if you race a lot, you've had your fair share of DNFs.
It's, so it was just, we did the Peavine Hill climb. And before it even started, I was warming up and I couldn't put out like 300 watts.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't going to work. Like,
this is going to do me no benefit, right?
Yeah. As you learn, so there's a difference between, I think some people equate DNFs with not being tough, right? And there's a difference. There's sometimes
huge difference.
Your body is in this little rut where you're not performing, and actually more performance will just put you farther in that rut. And when you're experienced, you know the difference between that and I've given up mentally.
Yes.
So I don't like the mental DNFs, but I do like this is going to impact me long term, and this isn't part of my goal. Like I knew Leadville last year, that impacted me long term, but it was part of my goal.
Yep.
So I went super deep, knowing that my wife always talks about. She's like, never do Leadville. It took me a month, Jonathan, to get back.
And this kind of ties to the differentiation between quitting and failing. I mean, failure is out of your hands, and it sounds like Christy pushed to the point, I'm guessing, of nutritional. A handicap. She just didn't get her nutrition right. So if she made it 8,000 feet into a 10,000-foot climb and then just petered out, couldn't do it anymore, it sounds like she's running out of gas. So nutritionally,
same to me.
Very probably. And even if that wasn't it, you get to a point where, I mean, another 2,000 feet of climbing when you're in that dark of a place, what do you hope to gain from that?
Unless it's your big goal. And it's not a big goal.
If Christy was at Ironman or half world champs there, right, in France, I guarantee you she would have found a way to push through.
If it's finished at all costs, this is my event. I'm just going to make this happen.
But I think that she did the right thing. If it's not building toward your goal, and that's the thing. So a lot of cyclists, I think it comes out of fear. They're so afraid of what other people will think, or they're so afraid of what they will think of themselves if they quit, that they never leave it as an option. And I also understand how dangerous it can be if you give up once. It's easier to give up again. I understand that as well. But if you're balanced with yourself and you're honest and you just look at this objectively, there are times, like you said, Nate, where if you keep pushing through, it does not make sense. It doesn't give you any more benefit. And most people listening to this have some sort of goal they're reaching for. Everything should build toward that. So if you have an event and you get so distracted with it that you put yourself in a hole just to finish that race for no real reason at the cost of your main goal, you've missed the boat.
This happens in triathlon a lot because Ironmans take a lot out of you. And with pros, they had a bad swim, they're off on the bike. It does them no good to get 25th place in the pro field. So they're thinking in their head, hey, there's a 70.3 coming up or another Ironman race where if I pull out after 4 hours right now, I can have a shot to do that other race. And sometimes I've seen on forums, people are like, oh, those pros, like, why aren't they pushing through? They're disrespectful to everyone else who does it. And I respect both. I forget his name. But there's another famous pro triathlete who would always just push through, no matter how big. And I respect that too. But it's just the goals are different. And I DNF. So in crits, if I am not in a place to like score points right now, I'm in the pack, like, one, I don't want to sprint, and two, I've just pulled out. I'm like, hey, I'm pretty tired. Like, why finish? Why sprint for 30th place? May get a crash, may get a concussion.
I think it's
contextual. I mean, what are you after in that case? Are you there to finish at all costs? A 60-minute criterium on a Tuesday night? Probably not. You're probably there to have a good race, to push yourself in certain ways that you recognize you're not going to be able to do that night. So you're not getting out of it what you intended to get out of it. So there's nothing wrong with pulling the plug in cases like that.
Yep. I think it's a healthy relationship to have.
10,000-foot climb, Haleakala? I don't know how many other 10,000-foot climbs there are in the world.
Pretty high, yeah.
Maybe not
probably not a single climb. She's probably building
race.
up to it.
So over the course of the race, 10,000.
Yeah.
But in any case, she got well into it and just recognized the point of
no big deal.
I think we need to have an open and healthy relationship with DNFs. Yeah. And what I mean with that is the fact that, like, basically so many people, I feel like they're so afraid of them that they just cut it completely off. But I feel like you have to understand that there is utility at times in calling it quits.
Yeah, and if you quit a race, it doesn't make you a quitter. It really doesn't. I mean, a quitter is a particular personality, but quitting a race here and there for the right reasons or just for reasons you deem right, it's fine.
Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you are habitually quitting when you don't really need to, then that's different, right? But if there's calling it quits.
Quitters know who they are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you know it too.
Yeah. On some level. Whoa, Chad.
Yeah. But you also, I think everyone's capable of being a quitter at some point, right? And you kind of have to, recognize that and differentiate between that and then just making the wise choice. Because at times you just have to make the wise choice. Yeah, that's it.
And Chrissy, for what it's worth, it sounds like you're being really hard on yourself too. You're referring to this as a horrendous day and hey, you're clearly just being very tough on yourself. I would just chalk it up to more experience to inform later decisions.
And nutrition mistakes happen so much, like to so many people. So it's not a horrendous day.
I bet that's all this was too. And everyone's gotten their nutrition wrong at some point in time.
Yeah. So it's not a horrendous day. It's once again, we're talking about quitting and failing. It's okay to fail. In fact, through the training process, you should fail. That's normal.
It's gonna happen.
Yep, it's gonna happen. So now, as far as using it to fuel yourself to come back stronger, I mean, once again, it's not a horrendous day. So in my case, I wouldn't use it as fuel to come back stronger. If you do feel like you failed on your big day, then that would motivate me to come back stronger.
I just did San Rafael crit. And I was in last lap, perfect position, about to launch, crash right in front of me.
Yeah.
That has fueled me. Because I'm like, good to do it. But other days, like when Peavine, I didn't do it, I felt bad. I was just like, this is informing me that I need to change something.
Yeah, exactly.
Either have a little more rest or something like that.
Yep. Yeah. And you can't become, hell-bent after a DNF on just like finishing everything at all costs because once again, you're throwing wisdom out the window.
That extends to workouts too. I mean,
100%.
Recognizing that some days you just don't have it. You're not going to derive the full benefit from whatever the endeavor. Pull the plug.
I failed a workout on Monday. I failed Baxter. And I've done Baxter a few times and I could barely struggle through it. 40 minutes. It was like deep, and I thought, hey, this is pretty dumb. If I keep pushing on this, I'm not going to do a hard workout the next day.
So I
that's
stopped.
That's fine, right, Chad?
Risk to reward ratio in that case is just not worth it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Paints a very
you mentioned
picture.
San Rafael. I'm going to mention really quick because we will have a race analysis video, I think, coming up from that race, right?
Yeah, we're recording today.
But we also have some other race analysis videos that we posted on our YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com/TrainerRoad. And people love these things. They're awesome. They watch them on the trainer, off the trainer, everything else. And we have two different types of videos that go up. They're videos where we actually do voiceover, and you get to see our power all the time and like the stats that we're doing live on the video. But then there's videos where we narrate them, and Pete basically tells us what we did wrong and what we could have done or what we did well. And there are two videos up there now within the past week: losing the race in the final corner and 5 mistakes that cost me the race. So these are called learning videos.
Are these both yours?
Yeah, there was no good to it. It was only bad. I don't think Pete ever said you did a good job doing this. That was bad. That was bad.
Hey, it's all stuff we can learn from.
I know.
But then in addition to that, we also put up full race videos. And there are some races where we don't actually do any voiceover on because Pete and I did a road race, and you'll see Pete's footage. Mine didn't come out, but you'll see Pete's footage, and we both sat there after the road race. I was like, "Did you get anything?" He's like, "Nope, I didn't either." So we put the video up because some people like to watch that sort of stuff, whether they're on the train or something like that. It's a good thing. So you can check it out at trainerroad.com/podcast. Let's go into Steve's question.
No, YouTube.com/TrainerRoad.
Forgive me. Yes, thank you, Nate. Yeah, nailed it. Steve's question, one of the most important questions we've had, so we went to the serious experts. We brought in the heavy artillery on this one. Steve says, "Hello, TrainerRoad. Another equipment question, but not a common one. Does shoe weight matter? I have 2 mountain bike shoes or 2 mountain bikes and 2 road bikes with 1 pair of shoes to rule them all. The Specialized S-Works XC Carbon with a stiffness rating of 13. First of all, stiffness rating of 13 is purely arbitrary. It's something that they've created.
Marketing.
Yep, so that they can keep track of it. If you ask somebody from Shimano with their shoes or Giro, are you a stiffness rating of 13, they'll be like, what in the world is that? Because once again, it's just something they've created. And within Specialized lineup, you can use it to compare one shoe to the next. But outside of that, you wouldn't be able to.
Gotcha.
And every brand has something like that. So he says, I use the Crank Brothers egg beaters on the mountain bikes and candy pedals on the road bikes since they have a little bit of a platform. So another question, he says, am I leaving speed on the table by not wearing a proper road shoe on the road? Comfort is not an issue. He says there's about a 50-gram difference per shoe between the Specialized high-end mountain bike and road shoes. Thanks for all you do. 5 stars all around. So first things first with weight.
Yeah,
maybe?
50 grams of shoe because people want to know this.
Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
These are the important things. This is what we spend. This is why we spend $500 on a pair of shoes instead of $300 sometimes, right?
So expensive.
Which is ridiculous. So we went, like I said, brought in the heavy artillery. My brother is an actual rocket scientist. He doesn't really get to tell us what he does for a job. He probably just makes up lies all the time. And he went deep into this one. So we've got a lot of stuff. So first of all, his assumptions. Once again, heavy artillery, folks. Important stuff. It says this is only finding the contribution of shoe weight, not bike drag, no drivetrain, no crank weight, nothing else, just the energy required to move the shoes. And every other form of weight, drag, or other is stripped out so you can see just what the shoe weight does. Number 2, power transfer from the shoes, example, like stiffness, is neglected. That would be really hard to test. You can't just do that with math. You have to have sensors in a shoe to really test that. That'd be crazy.
I've talked about this before, but the stiffness in shoes, Specialized is so good at marketing that I think that if their 13 stiffness shoe saved 4 watts over 11, they would be singing that all the time, right? If they could measure it and it was more than a watt or even it was 1 watt, they'd be telling us.
Oh, yeah. We would know.
Someone at Specialized, if you've been like hiding that, they wouldn't just hide it, right? They'd be like, oh, yeah, it's actually 10 watts faster.
Yeah, so it's either it isn't or it's really hard to actually measure that and figure it out in an objective way, right?
Or it's so small that it's not worth telling people.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd rather have everyone just think stiffer's better.
Yeah. So, and
but I like you Specialized.
Just on stiffness really quick, before we go too far into that, stiffness isn't always more stiffness isn't always best.
Sometimes your feet hurt.
Yeah, sometimes it hurts. Now, on the contrary, if you have a very flexy shoe, it very commonly causes discomfort because of the fact that your cleat is like a hard point and the rest of the shoe flexes around that. So that causes discomfort. So stiffness aside. Then my brother's assuming a perfectly ideal cyclical pedal stroke. At steady state, the weight of the shoes is not much of a factor, right? Because they're just moving over in the same motion like that. It is a factor primarily when accelerating. And so he said, I chose to analyze acceleration profile rather than a steady state profile.
Okay.
This is our profile, 0 to 90 RPM over 5 seconds. That's what we're dealing with here.
So I just want to say something. So, the objects in motion tend to stay in motion.
Yes.
It doesn't take much energy once something is heavier, once it's spun up, to keep it spinning up.
Well
it's
said.
The acceleration that we're concerned about, which happens a lot in cycling. So people are concerned, I got to start sprinting. I got to go from 90 to 120. But you're doing a pretty big acceleration, 0 to 90 over 5 seconds. So
5 seconds.
It's not incredible snap, but
because we would get joules if we don't have time, but since we add time into it, that's what makes it watts, right? So he says power is an output of energy over a period of time. So the arbitrary window of time is 5. So if we scroll down here in this wonderful document, this white paper, if I will, built out for this. So he says basically, if you plug in each shoe mass and solve with the formula that he has, and if you guys want to see this, let us know in the forum. We can put this in here. But he basically, and forgive me, I should say we picked a more extreme example. We picked the S-Works XC or the Recon shoe that they have, and then I picked their S-Works Exo shoe, which is like the very, very light shoe that they have. So the difference between that, I believe it's 260 to 340 grams. So you can see we're jumping bigger. Yep. Yeah. So a bigger difference between them. So he says, if you put in the shoe mass for each one and you solve for the equation, it gives you a total work input of 0.7 joules for the heavy shoes and 0.3 joules for the light shoes. But then if you look at this, when the actual expense of watts is considered, it's 0.09 watts difference in total. So 0.09 of a watt.
For 5 seconds.
Over 5 seconds. So that is a very small amount. In other words, as my brother says it, he says, in general, there's likely no perceptible difference between the two pairs of shoes in terms of their weight alone. If you can distinguish 9/100ths of a watt when you spool up to pace, you're likely a product of Skynet. So
this is too. So like if you with
right.
the 5 seconds, if you don't like it, if it's 0.7 joules for the heavy shoes and 0.3, so that's what, a difference of 0.4 joules. Or, for 1 second, it would just be that. So half a watt for 1 second from 0 to 90. And I think from 0 to 90 in a second is pretty fast.
Yeah,
That's
it's
half
really
a watt.
fast. Yeah.
So I don't.
Basically never happens.
Yeah, but so when you're actually cycling though, it's really like 90 to 100, right? And you usually ramp that up.
Yes. So it shows you really it really doesn't make a difference, right?
It doesn't make a difference.
But he also says, and I agree with this, if you look down and see some super expensive shoes on your feet and it makes you feel a bit stronger, that will be a bigger factor than the actual mass-based differences. And that's I totally agree. When you feel good, you race good. That's sort of a thing, right?
We're talking about how many grams again for the heavy to the light?
Yeah, I think it's 260 to 340.
So that's
backwards. Sorry.
Yeah, like half a pound
less. It's like a third of a pound, yeah.
Okay, so that climbing, to some of you will be like, oh, a third of a pound climbing?
Yep.
I will totally do that.
Yep. This shows.
That's a little bit.
We obsess over weight probably too much as cyclists. Actually, in fact, we totally do. Not probably. We absolutely obsess over weight too much as cyclists. And I think that it doesn't quite matter as much as we think. That said, for me, what shoes come down to is comfort, right? Like trying to find the right shoe for your foot.
Always, yeah.
And I loved the look of the Giro Tech laces, and I currently use them. They do not fit my foot.
They're too narrow. I've got like 3 pairs of Giros that are all just gleamingly perfect, and I have no use for them.
They fit me. Shoes are like saddles. So whatever we say, don't be like,
no.
It's totally individual.
Yes, and there's no you can get demo saddles, right? But you can't get demo shoes.
I know.
They're really hard to find.
It's a narrow shoe, so you have to have a narrow foot. If you've got a wide forefoot, which I do, it's not the right shoe for you.
So Chad and I have the same size feet, but different shaped feet.
Yeah.
So we switch shoes. Occasionally, we'll buy one and be like, I don't like this.
Do you like the Giros? They work for you?
I like the Giros, the laced ones.
I got a boatload of shoes for you then.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Lightly used, too.
Yeah.
But I've given you a few specialized ones that were not fitting me well.
Wider forefoot, and they work for me. They're not my favorite. Shimano's are my favorite.
So find a buddy.
Yeah.
It really does. If you can find a friend that has the same size shoe and then just borrow for a ride, amazing.
It's a big help. So generally what I've found is that Giros tend to fit narrow in the forefoot, wider in the heel. And that's where the big problem is for me. Specialized are wider in the forefoot, narrow in the heel. And they really kind of clamp down on that heel. Shimano is a good compromise between them, but it still has a roomy toe box. Shimano's are the best fitting ones that I've used. But that said, once I got cut, I thought Giros were impossible for me to use. In fact, I used to get pressure sores on the outside of my small toe.
Oh, yeah.
And they would be extremely painful anytime I wore them. Yeah. And down to the point of blood filling up my shoe, right, and sock. So these things, got rid of those, right? Yeah. But now I have custom insoles, and I got them from, I'll mix it up, Surefoot. That's, I believe, the company, or Superfeet. No, Superfeet is like generic insoles. Surefoot, I believe, is the ones where you go to ski resorts and they do your custom boots. They will also do custom cycling insoles. You just bring in your shoes and they'll make them. And ever since I got those done, I can actually use Giros. And what I've found is that my foot in the front, it's still not ideal though, but my foot splayed out a ton when it wasn't properly supported.
Because your arch wasn't supported?
Yeah, and I have a really high arch, and my arch is really far forward rather than far back. So as a result, when I used Specialized has the 3 heights of insole, I would even use the green one and it still wasn't enough. But once I got proper insoles, my foot's supported and it doesn't splay out.
I'm in the exact same boat. Maybe you're not getting my Giros. I'm going to maybe get some custom insoles.
They're expensive. It's like $250 for a pair of soles.
Oh, I know. I've got them in my ski boots and they're wonderful.
The cool thing is I've had them, I'm going on the 3rd year now. And that's the thing. You can have these things for a long time.
Yeah, you can swap shoe to shoe to shoe.
Yeah, and I just swap them from shoe to shoe. So that's one thing. If you're really having a hard time finding them, you go get a custom insole made and then try it in your shoes and see if that works.
So Steve, going back to road and mountain bike, the thing that there's the science part and the safety part. So using mountain bike shoes on the road, there's going to be some aero penalty. But if you're not racing, who cares?
Yeah, probably minimal. We should say it's not going to be a lot.
Yeah, the pedal could be. We could be talking. Depending on how you ride, it could be 5
if you're a heel down person, more. Yeah. If you're a toe down, less.
The thing that I would be most concerned about would be sprinting like in the Crank Brothers or like an SPD, they don't lock you in. It's much easier to get out of those than a speed play or
if you look
Shimano.
at one of our first race analysis videos, you'll see that in the video, a rider blowing out of a pedal when trying to sprint.
Oh, and he was in mountain bike.
Yep.
So that would be the one thing. But if you're never sprinting, you're just like riding.
It's fine.
If you're like not racing, just keep your mountain bike shoes.
There are two things I would say with mountain bike pedals. First of all, he uses Crank Brothers egg beaters and candies. Crank Brothers have, when you push down into that mechanism, there is loss. And I don't care what anybody says, there's loss, because it's basically a spring-loaded egg beater that you would like look at an egg beater in a mixer, but it's just spring-loaded. And when you push down more, it splays out more.
So you think with every downstroke you're suffering that loss?
Yeah, there's a bit of loss, yeah.
But
especially when you press really hard.
0.0001 watts?
That's the thing. Might need to get my brother on it. Yeah. And then the same thing with SPDs, just not to as severe of a degree. That's like this traditional mountain bike pedal design you see from Shimano. I use Xpedos. They use the same design though. When I push really hard, and if you're getting into like pushing and pulling, so when I really steep gradients and you're fighting for traction on a mountain bike, for example, or on a road bike, when it's really steep and you're really just probably, taking some liberties at really throwing a lot of mass and torque into the pedals. Mm-hmm. When you're doing that sort of a thing, you are going to get more loss than like a locked in look pedal, for example, something like that, like a look road pedal where you're just locked in. So there will be some loss if you really want to get down to it. But for most people, it's totally fine. Use your mountain bike shoes and use your mountain bike pedals. It's not affecting things at all. So, and if any roadie gives you problems about that, take the group right onto dirt and show them what's up. So, Michael, his question is about how to trim a tri-plan. We've talked about trimming plans, everything else like that, many different times. We haven't talked about this for some time, so we'll just get into it here. It says, hey coaches, I'm seeking advice on this. I have 21 weeks from now to my A race, a long course triathlon, full distance Ironman, and my bike leg is the disappointment. So now I'm using TrainerRoad to compete on the bike and not just on the run. Sweet, nice job. Hopefully, and what most triathletes try to do really is if they can get stronger on the bike, that means they don't have to try quite as hard or go quite as deep on the bike, and then they can still run really fast.
You get a stronger run.
Get a stronger run. It's pretty cool. So the recommended long course triathlon plan is 28 weeks, 12 weeks of base, 8 weeks of build, and 8 weeks of the specialty plan. So what's the optimal way to make the 28-week plan work in the 21 weeks that I have available? It says, do I race or do I reduce the base or the specialty? I presume leave the build at 8 weeks, since that's what I really need, a higher sustained power threshold, that's a keen observation on his end.
It is. Yeah.
I've been doing half Ironmans for 6 years, even made it to Worlds, that's to the roll down, looking to be at the pointy end of the age group in my full distance race, but that's not going to happen without a massive improvement in my bike performance over the next 4.5 months. Thanks so much, Michael. So we'll go over some basics and principles behind this and what we do, and some questions that you probably want to ask. But then in addition to this, and we'll put links into the forum post on this one, Producer Tucker, but you can also find this on our Help Center. One of our employees, Bryce Lewis, has put together articles to guide you through many different scenarios on this. So you'll hear things and you'll be able to read things on this. So Chad, where should we start on this one?
So the most basic answer to this is if you're a new athlete and you don't have base fitness, you prioritize base fitness. If you're a very experienced athlete, then you're probably going to be more concerned with building fitness and sharpening it. So you might actually cut out base. That's the simplest reply. For you specifically, Michael, I would ask myself a few questions. First off, consider your training and triathlon history. That'll basically lead you back to what we just talked about. If you have an ample amount of base you've accumulated over a number of years, that sort of thing, then base training isn't going to be the priority it would be if you were a new athlete, or maybe just a half distance triathlete who's moving up to full distance,
which is common.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So what type of training have you done, and how have you responded to that training? That's also going to influence, what you prioritize. If you know, I go through that base phase and I see marginal, if any, gains, well, base probably isn't having a real impact on what you do, and you've done it enough times to recognize it. So obviously cut from base. Look at your injury history. Jumping into, so say you're coming back from a recent injury, or you're prone to injury if your training load or the type of training you do is a particular thing. That could help steer you as well. In almost all cases, if you're coming back from an injury, you have to ease back into it. So in that case, I wouldn't even worry about getting through specialty. I would absolutely start at the very beginning. Base, move through build. You get any specialty, that's just icing on the cake. Whether you're a first time or a long time triathlete, that's going to influence too. If you've done this a number of times and you've done it recently, specifically, base isn't going to be as important as it would be. If you've done it a lot of times, but there's been a big gap between this time and the last time, well, I'd probably steer you back to base again. Let's see. Oh, and then we're talking ultra distance here. And when it comes to ultra distance events, whether it's triathlon or on the bike or running, durability is everything. And durability comes with base, and durability comes through consistency. So,
yes.
So if durability is an issue for you, if you have, achy knees, if you're prone to plantar fasciitis, that sort of thing, absolutely prioritize base and really push the consistency. Don't miss workouts.
It's my biggest concern with the triathlon challenge you pitched in the forum, Nate, for all three of us.
I don't know if I should bring it up or not.
Let's talk about that later. Let me wrap this up. And then also, are you competing or are you completing? I mean, are you just out there to survive it? Because if you're out there to survive it, base. You could do only base.
Yep. If
you want to compete, you have to be sharp, and you can't just dive right into the sharpening unless, of course, you have a lot of you're already building on a lot of fitness, which it sounds like you might be starting out. I'm not sure where you're starting from, but you're looking at the entire cycle here.
Yep.
And then as far as the competing versus completing thing, this may be an A event, but you still have to consider what's realistic. I mean, just because this is your most high priority event, are you in shape enough, fast enough to be competitive, or are you still just completing it? So even though it's an A event, it doesn't mean you have to get all the way through a specialty phase and be as sharp as possible.
Our eyes get bigger than our stomachs sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe it's just not realistic. Maybe you haven't risen to the level of accomplishment or experience, training load to be a podium or a top 10 contender. So in that case, back to prioritizing base.
Yeah, and I think producer Tucker live during that question there was throwing in the links to these articles, which, way to go, Tucker.
Yep.
So you can check those out. Once again, just search for episode 3.
Quite a lot of information on
that. Nate, I'm going to jump back to this. Sorry, Chad. You didn't fully
We're going to make it official. This is one of
the worst ideas I've ever heard.
You said yes.
And then I thought about it.
Okay.
Lay it out, Nate.
I'll lay it out. So
yeah,
this is a long time coming, but I'm thinking of a new challenge for us. After Cape Epic, those who don't know,
2021.
Yeah,
so this would be in 2022.
No, it could be 2021. Mine's races in March.
Let's push it to 2022.
Okay, 2032. No, it doesn't matter. I want to have another race between us. That will be challenging. And the idea, here are the rules. We do an Ironman, full distance Ironman.
I'm on board with that.
And we have to do. We have
full.
6 months to train for it.
That's what I'm not on board with.
And see let me finish before we talk about everything. Okay. And we can't do any triathlons before that. You can do standalone events, marathons, open water swims. You have to do open water swims, Jonathan.
Yes.
Bike rides, anything like that. But the idea is, I've done one Ironman and it was horrendous. But I would like to have these two guys experience what it's like to not only train for it, but also do it. And there's a lot of people in the forum are like, wow, you're going to get injured running. There are ways to, someone will get, every runner will get injured, but there are ways to ramp up volume better.
Yeah, and you're not saying that we can't run beforehand. You're just saying that we don't want to do another Ironman beforehand, something like that.
Exactly, or do a whole bunch of stuff, because it adds to the mystique.
Okay.
Yeah,
you're still training.
It's
you're
not
doing
going
triathlon training for 6 months. No.
Okay.
And I think you should do a marathon ahead of time if you've never done a marathon, just to see what it feels like and what kind of pace you can do, and then 30 minutes off of that maybe for your Ironman and all of that jazz. I think it would be 6 months. I like that, because or else we'll dive in too deep. We'll do it for a year. We'll burn out. Really, the 6 month time limit is for us so we don't burn out.
It's a workable window for us.
Yeah, exactly. Or else we'll stop. And I think we should try to do it on 10 hours a week and just follow TrainerRoad plans.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Heck yeah.
Not anything like crazy, because we don't have time to do that.
No, yeah.
I think we might be able to eke out. It's a little easier to do 10 hours with triathlon, because you can squeeze in runs a lot easier than you can squeeze in bikes.
Oh, yeah.
You can do a lunchtime run, 30 minutes.
You can run out really quick and get in a quick run.
And on the forum, there's a bunch of people who are like, I don't want to hear anything about triathlon. You just sat through Jonathan. There's probably mountain bikers.
Oh, yeah.
There's triathletes who heard all about Leadville who
Yes.
don't care.
Yeah.
And there's no topic that everyone likes.
And here's the deal. The other side of it, too, if you don't like listening to triathlon stuff, you can glean so much information from listening to this. It all revolves around training the body, right? It's all the same principles.
Recovery, nutrition.
Yes. And if anything, from multi-sport, it concentrates things. So you cyclists can pick up a ton from listening to that because the consequences are more severe, just in the sense that you have less available time, more things to do, that sort of a thing.
I'd like to get some swim experts on the podcast and run experts on the podcast, and have kind of like how Lee did with mountain biking, teach us how to run better. We need it.
Yeah.
And so for everyone's history,
I'm going to look like Patrick Lange when I run.
You do.
Think that's possible?
Everyone's like worried about you two. They kept trying to make it easier for Jonathan to do well. So Jonathan's first 5K was 19 minutes, and he ran like 7 times.
No, less. Yeah.
But less times than that.
Much less. Yeah.
So I've never ran a 19-minute 5K running 40, 50 miles a week, which is really annoying.
Yeah.
And if we had a hilly race, he would just destroy us on the bike too. So we're trying to pick which one.
Chad's really good.
Jonathan can't swim though.
He's a sleeper.
Chad,
I can swim, but
but not like Chad or I.
Don't ask me to get anywhere at a specific time.
We can get you lessons and teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
And we can get a little safety belt so you can pull something.
There's safety belts?
There's safety belts.
Yeah.
Is that legal?
For open water swims?
Yep. It's so when you
Cool.
Again, this is a cool thing for people to learn.
Yeah.
First, a wetsuit is like a life jacket almost. It's not a life jacket, but you get a lot of buoyancy.
Yeah.
There's also little belts you can wear that if you get in trouble in open water swim, you can pull something and you're inflated.
Do they do this during the race?
You can wear them. They're legal to wear during the race. Most people don't because there's kayakers everywhere and stuff, and you can just rest.
And we just went up to Donner to do an open water swim prior to Amaret's triathlon.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd had this prior, but they make these little buoys that you drag behind you. They inflate. You can put your iPhone in them. It's a safety device, obviously, but it's also a visibility device. And there were a lot of boats on that lake, which I was paddleboarding. Stand up paddleboarding next to her, and I felt like I needed to flag these people because they see the paddleboarder, they're not going to try to run me over. But I had to stay close to her because there was nothing. I mean, her swim cap was kind of bright, but either way, there's a lot of these devices that you can use to make open water swimming a bit more safe.
You don't want to open water swim across a lake
alone
when there's boats. You got to keep next to the shore, because you don't want someone to run you over.
I think it probably wouldn't be necessary in the event. I've never done, other than like swimming out to buoys at lakes, as a kid, that sort of thing. I've never done a big
Chad
swim.
used to be a duathlete.
Yes.
You swim already. You did.
Sort of.
Yeah, but I mean, you can...
I can swim, and I would train to swim too.
He's certainly the strongest of all of us in terms of the strongest body.
In my yard.
Obviously.
Oh, yeah, he is building.
Gonna have my own pool. I plan to own the swim if we do this. And I've got a great swim coach because Amaret's she swam in college.
So she's good. So the thing about the strength thing that I'm getting at, though, is the fact that people were complaining or like fearing about the injury thing, and I think that Chad has a very strong body that's capable, so he's probably less likely to get injured.
Yeah, but I'm also prone to riding the high of my cycling fitness and carrying that into my running and overdoing the running. So it is something that has to be done carefully.
Yes, that's exactly, with care, and we understand. We're not going to try 20-mile week of running right away.
No.
A lot of people are concerned about us getting injured on the run, and I appreciate that. But I don't hear a lot of concern about us crashing in crits or mountain bikes, serious hospital injury.
I know.
People aren't saying, Nate, you shouldn't be doing this.
I know, right? It's kind
sore
of backwards.
knees and an inflamed IT band. It's going to happen, but that's just part of every triathlete, every athlete goes through this. As cyclists, you may not have injuries as often, but every runner has it. And that's part of the experiment is how do you do that?
I'm going to make it my goal to get all the way to and through this triathlon injury-free.
And you can, another great, there's so much I have to say about this, but having all your runs be walk runs, that's it's
magical.
It's
you
magical.
Can still go fast too.
Hal Higdon's son ran a 2:30 walking all the aid stations.
Yeah.
That shows you.
Yeah, a marathon.
Walk through, grab a drink, splash some water on your head, get going again.
Yep. And honestly, there's probably going to be a bit of walking on the marathon when we do it.
I plan to walk the whole thing. I figure if I go fast enough in the swim, fast enough on the bike, I buy myself a 5-hour marathon.
A 5-hour marathon.
My first Ironman, my run was longer than my bike. This first Ironman, it was. I was in a deep dark spot.
That's a tough day.
So I'll say this much on the. I want to do this just because I respect all of the full distance or just triathletes in general, but especially those that do the full distance. respect them so much. Like, and after going to different,
every year my respect rises when we go to Kona. Holy.
So I was at Ironman Arizona.
We're not doing Kona.
It was cool. It was cool and nice at Ironman Arizona, and I was still, my mind was blown, right? Just by because you hear it, but it's something different when you're actually seeing somebody do it. So when we actually do it, it's going to be something entirely different. Yeah, Kona's crazy, but I don't think any of us are going to Kona qualify here, but I think the goal is just to do this. Yeah, maybe Chad. So
you're in your age group. Will you be 50 by then? Maybe
23.
No,
which ones?
You'll be 49.
Which race are we thinking of?
Okay, so
should we leave that up to the people?
I have a few in mind. I'm going to say them, but there's a couple people too saying that we should do 70.3. I'm open to that. We could probably race a 70.3, but it's just not as epic.
Look, if I'm going to do this thing, let's just go for it.
Wait, we're talking 2022?
Yeah, you got time.
How about 50?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh,
cool.
Kona qualifying slot.
Yeah, 50. That would be then you got to do Kona. If you qualify for Kona,
you got to do it.
It is requirement to do Kona. This is like,
it's like
I'm gonna
qualifying
get sued
for Boston or something. You got to do it.
You got to do it, right?
Yeah. Ironman Arizona's in November. That's a relatively easy course because it's not too steep or anything like that.
The other one next to us is Santa Rosa. It's a little bit of rolling.
Yeah.
And it could be hot.
Is Lake Placid hard?
I believe so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them that are hard. I mean, we could go flat.
Penticton. Oh, that could be cool. Yeah.
That one's really hilly.
I know.
That would be Jonathan Wynn.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can decide if we want to go.
Let us know if you guys have an event that you think that we should do. Which full distance one?
Santa Rosa.
Yeah. That could be interesting.
I'd like to go. It's the most accessible. It'd be easiest.
I'd like to do a cooler location, though. I mean, Santa Rosa's cool and all, but
we go there all the time.
Yeah, let's go to Cozumel. There we go.
Yeah,
Ironman Cozumel.
No, but I think it'll be interesting. It's such a long ways out. If you're going to be swimming some with your pool, I don't care, but don't do full triathlon training until we all start together.
No, fair enough. I don't want to anyway. I'm having a hard enough time getting back on the bike.
Yeah,
running and swimming on top of it's not real likely.
Yeah, but the smart thing would be to raise your bike volume up, like I'm going to do for Cape Epic.
So then you don't have to do quite as much through the training part.
Exactly. You're already used to a high amount of volume. You're going to cut down. You're still going to have a high intensity on the bike.
Covered.
Cut that down.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are worried about the bike part.
Yeah. Ramp into.
We're not going to win age group or something. We're just trying to get through.
I'm not worried about the swim either. It's really the run, and the run makes it on an Ironman. Yeah. You're either you're running or walking pretty much with us. Yeah. You're either going to go run really slowly or walk, and the really slow run can save you an hour. 90 minutes compared to one of us who was walking.
Yeah. So you can join us. First of all, let us know on the forum which event you'd like to see us do and what you think of this. Search for episode 214. But then we also, every week, we stream this live on YouTube. And you should join us live on YouTube because it's fun. You can see us. You can chat with other people that are listening. You can ask your questions. And we'll actually answer some of those questions right now. So first one from Stu. He says, from Pierce, says, how often are you washing your trainer bibs and other apparel you wear on the trainer? Nate, go. No, you just seem very ready to answer this.
Like every time.
Yes.
Like, is there?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know. Like, how often do you wash your underwear?
Yeah, every time.
Is there anything other than?
I do. I never put on a pair of used bibs
ever.
I do. I'll just come clean.
Whoa, you're not coming clean.
I'll do 2 recovery rides in a row in the same bib. I mean, if I do a recovery ride for 30 or 40 minutes or even an hour, and I have the fan on me the whole time, I'm not sweating that much.
Yeah.
I let the bibs hang and I wear them again.
You are messing with fire.
for about 40 years now, and I'm still okay.
I did one ride on the wrong saddle.
Yeah.
And I have a saddle store right now. Mm-hmm. His name's Matthias. And
that's enough. Seriously.
Every ride, I have to I know I'm going to get injured from this because I'm sitting on the saddle differently.
Yeah,
because of
it's
it.
Not good.
And I don't want to take a week off.
I've been doing this for seriously 15 years. It hasn't happened yet. I feel like I'm in the clear.
So I wash everything every time. I never put on dirty stuff. That's like my rule. I take that back. In some cases, I've commuted to the office and then I'll wear the same kit home, that sort of a thing.
That's disgusting.
So yeah, once again, I wish that I should just bring an extra kit and ride home in a clean kit. But that sort of stuff freaks me out. Pierce also mentions, I wear a hat, but now after a couple of years of wearing it, it smells terrible. I can imagine after a couple of years.
Oh yeah, you got to wash
hopefully
those.
Hopefully you've washed that.
And little tip, you can put it in your dishwasher.
Oh, like a hat, you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ball cap. They have little cages that you can put them in that help them retain their shape, and you can throw them in your washer. But if you don't have one of those, or you just don't want to get one of those, we just wash our hats in the dishwasher.
Oh, clever.
Top shelf.
I've never thought of that. So yeah, anyways, and then I use base layers usually on the trainer when I'm training on there. That makes it a little easier than wearing a full jersey that's like thick and heavy and that sort of a thing.
Bibs.
So.
Bibs in my birthday suit.
Cart Guy says, from Nate Straub, it looks like he doesn't use erg mode. What are the advantages, disadvantages of resistance mode over erg? Mm-hmm. So I do use erg mode. I use it on aerobic rides. When it is an intense ride, I just like shifting and like looking at it. I don't know what it is.
For what it's worth, though, anyone who questions the efficacy of erg rides hasn't done erg rides. All the naysayers and poo-pooers when it comes to erg just don't ride erg. They don't understand.
Yeah, it's fine. Both of them are fine. You're going to get, and you'll be, with time, you'll get very good at being able to hold power targets without erg mode. Yeah. Erg mode always will hold you to them, so you can rely on that.
Either one works.
Yep, either one works. There's really...
Choose what you like.
I feel very confident that I could do a workout in erg mode, and then I could go back, like a sweet spot workout or something. I could go back without erg mode, and it would be the same.
Yeah.
So,
John O has a question for Jonathan. Did call-up position make a real difference at Nats?
Yeah, let's cover that. So they had, once again, we've talked about this before, but how USAC does it on their ranking points, which is a flawed system because some races, like in road, it's common to have P1-2s scored together, right, for a race. But you usually don't get your upgrade points based off of that, right? Yeah. Relatively speaking, there's a whole system there. But with their ranking points, it's all relative. So there are some mountain bike races in the Midwest and the East Coast is much more common where they score pros and ones together, right? So a fast pro shows up and takes first place, and then a guy takes 27th. But the guy that takes 27th at that race, he may be way slower than another rider, but he gets way more relative ranking points because he raced against a pro. So it's flawed. And there was, in the age group ahead of us,
you have to beat them.
Exactly. So I could win every race, right? Every race. And it could be against really fast Cat 1 competition, but I can have a back of the row call up compared to other people that have
because pros aren't
slower.
in your race.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
and you could get last place. I could get a higher call up than you at nationals.
Yes.
By just getting last place at races.
Just showing up and making sure you cross the line.
Yeah. What were your call ups in the short track and the XCO?
Short track, I was first, strangely, because there aren't as many short tracks, and I think it's because I took fourth at short track with a lot of fast folks in it at Soho. So I think that's why. But the other interesting thing is they've been doing, I think I heard that in Colorado, they scored a short track series this year, like a popular one. They scored it as normal XCO to give people upgrade points for XCO. So that's not really fair. But as a result, the people that were high up in XCO were really far back in short track in terms of call up. But it really didn't matter that much.
What was your XCO call up?
I think I was 7th. An XCO for the call up.
How big was the field?
30 something. Yeah. Okay. So that's not like a big, it didn't really matter that much, at least on that course. But it was funny to see some of the people that you could clearly tell were not fast cyclists that got that first row call up, and they were really excited about getting first row. And there was one of them in the age group ahead of us. They took off 3 minutes ahead of us. And by the time they got 1 minute up the trail, they would switch back above us so we could see him. And he was 30 seconds behind the entire field 1 minute in, and he had first row call up. So that shows that it's a broken system. So,
Andrew has a question for you, Chad. I'm new to TrainerRoad, having a blast gearing up for September races. I love the outside workouts, but what I love most is trying to hang with group rides that are faster than me. How do you recommend incorporating group rides into the schedule? So I'm thinking drop ride, really hard, Hammerfest on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. How do you incorporate that?
Just swap out your Saturday workout. I mean, the Saturday workouts are, I think in all cases, 90 minutes.
Yeah.
At least on low volume, and maybe, often enough, they're at least 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that there's the duration component of it. Mm-hmm. And then they're typically a little more muscle endurance focused, but they'll often incorporate a fair amount of high intensity intervals. And that's very much what a drop ride is. So I would just quite simply swap it.
Easy peasy.
Gavin says, I will be starting to race cyclocross this fall. Besides raising my FTP and working on short VO2 efforts, what should I do to train? So first of all, listen to episode 212, I think, where we talked about training for cyclocross, because that's a common question that's coming up amongst all the questions you submit at trainerroad.com/podcast right now. So you can listen to that where we cover some stuff, but skills is super important with cyclocross.
Usually.
Like you waste so much energy otherwise, right? It's amazing. Every year when I go back in, I usually don't do any skills and I do my first cross race and I'm like, oh my gosh, like
I need to work on skills.
I need to work on this again. It's simple little things. Cody Kaiser, he said that every year he starts out
Low
walking.
speed skills.
Yep. With his dismount and getting back on. So, and that guy knows what he's doing. So skills, work on a bunch of skills.
Peter asks, is there a way to test how much salt is in your sweat? I struggle from cramps on my long mountain bike rides, 3+ hours. I'm trying to improve my nutrition during rides. Yes, there is. We actually have that kit. We just haven't done it yet. Mm-hmm. And what is the company?
Oh boy.
Is it Precision Hydration?
No, it's not Precision
Hydration. They do it
Hydration.
also, and
this is with Jeff Copiabanco, I believe. He's a coach, and forgive me, Jeff, for not knowing it. I can't remember the name of it.
I'm sorry, it's off the top of our head. Yeah.
Okay.
We can look it up.
I'll find it right
and
now.
look for sweat salt loss tests, sodium concentration tests. I mean, do a search on it. I think Scratch does one too.
I don't think Scratch. No. I don't know.
But definitely Precision Hydration definitely does one.
So Jeff,
Breakthrough Performance Coaching.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I asked Jeff this question. I said, well, doesn't diet influence how
Apparently
salt,
not.
how salty your sweat is?
In other words, you eat a bunch or you don't eat
a bunch
lot.
of French fries and potato chips, salty things. Wouldn't I have more salt? And he gave me paragraphs of explanation that maybe Chad could do a deep dive on sometime.
Yeah.
But basically, answer is no. Mm-hmm. It does not.
Surprising, right?
Yeah, very surprising. Yeah. So that is.
So your sodium loss stays pretty consistent across changes as you as an athlete, as you age. I mean, it's surprising.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, kind of interesting stuff. So somebody says, do you have a longer version of the how to become a better mountain biker? I really like the video. Lee McCormick is coming out to train with us again. So we probably won't have a video from this one, but we certainly will have a podcast with him and we will share our learnings. He is awesome. For those that you should honestly follow that guy. Like there are very few people. Like if you follow me on social media, you'll probably just get like pretty bike
beautiful
pics.
pictures.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's like it, right? Follow me on Instagram. But then if you follow like Lee, I swear you get like really, really good insight. It's just he shares really good stuff. He demos a lot of products and then like shares like what he feels through it, and he's better at putting that sort of thing into words than anybody else ever read. So
he comes 2 weeks?
Yeah, because he comes a week after Leadville.
Yeah. John's going to be so fried.
And then I have EWS North Star a weekend after that.
That's great, though, that you're going to have Lee right before.
Oh, yeah, it's perfect.
Lee is also in one of our old podcasts, and he mentions a lot of things in the podcast that aren't in the video.
Yes.
So if you look through our podcast and look for Lee.
It was a good podcast.
Yeah.
Fantastic. He's absolutely the best skills coach I've come across. His way of teaching is incredible.
And the coach's eye is incredible, too.
Yes.
So I can't wait for him to teach me how to do a flat, fast turn.
Yeah, that's
over loose, over hard.
We're going to focus on turns this time, I think, right?
If I can do that, that's like of many, but
yeah,
there's a new level, and that's the low part. So
yep. Somebody asked, what's the best way to do an FTP test outdoors? Man, do it inside if you can, just because it really minimizes variables. That said, if you're going to do it outside, you want a consistent grade, and I would recommend doing so against a gentle gradient, nothing too much.
2 to 3%.
Yep.
Ideally.
Yep. And give yourself plenty of time to be able to, like, if you have a stretch of road and you're like, it's just enough to be able to do that, it's kind of tricky. And that's why the ramp test is so nice. Like, and don't try to do a ramp test outside. That's way too complex. And the other side of things too, I just feel like you do the ramp test and you've got it done in like 18 minutes. And it's inside, and you're gonna, you get a result that you can count on, rather than having to deal with variables outside. Mm-hmm. It's just it's tricky doing it out there.
It's a tough thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So lots of people asking questions about the salt stuff, which is interesting. It seems like it got things going. Okay. Somebody says, do you have one, Nick?
I just want to say. The Unattached Cyclist says, I saw this coming. Jonathan will, of course, crush the triathlon. I think my money's on Jonathan, too.
Yeah, come on.
Chad will do it and hate it. Is my call. Probably, right? About a month in, he's going to be right there. Nope. He's running a 19-minute 5K.
You're going to sub 40 10K. I mean, that's not...
Yeah, Chad's a good runner, too.
I can get to be.
Chad's really good.
Okay, last place for me. That's I'm not a runner.
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if I can build up to that sort of volume again. No matter how carefully I do it, it's just. I don't think it's going to be a fast thing. I think it's going to be a walk in the aid station, just like you described. It's
I
going to
really
be fast.
I really think, Chad, if you have a really good bike and you're fresh and you're running on 30 miles a week, which isn't 30 miles is good.
That sounds realistic.
You can run walk it and probably go sub 11 on an Ironman.
A sub 10, or I'm just not even going to bother. It's just like with Mauna Kea. I'm going to shut it down to a certain point. 10 hours
you
is
get some
it.
10 hours, I'm done.
That's it.
Your bike will be, especially you can get a really fast bike, get like sub 5.
What if
like
Chad
right around
qualifies for Kona? That would be so cool.
I know.
I'm not,
the complaining.
no pressure. I'm not adding it on for pressure. I just think it would be
cool, yeah.
Just, you're my friend, and we've worked together for so many years, and for you to be doing that, I would be.
We would be there.
Even if we weren't there for work, I would absolutely fly there because I'd just be so stoked.
Nice.
I would just the complaining about the sun and the heat will be amazing.
It would be amazing
because you would be in your sauna all the time.
I'm going to heat train for Kona this year, so I'm
to watch.
I'm already building intel.
Just to watch, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's serious.
I don't
for
understand.
people that don't know, it's serious. It's
Kona's so hard.
Yeah.
Just on being on Elite when they had just taken off on the marathon and they hit that first little turnaround, it was so bleeding hot.
Yeah.
Just watching them made me so sad.
We haven't been there during
So
a hot
stressed.
year.
I
Do you
know.
guys know that?
It's still never been a hot year.
Yeah, it's not. It's like been
Unreal.
last year was a cool year.
That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it was
It's
insane.
ridiculous.
Charlie says, this is really frustrating. Aren't there healthy people that have an FTP ceiling of 3 watts per kilogram? I've been training for years and cannot break this ceiling. So that's like, we've talked about this plenty of times before in terms of like, a lot of the time we'll talk about thresholds, and cycling and triathlon is predominantly male. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the way that the participation numbers show us, at least.
Is this a woman asking?
No, at least not that I think. So a lot of the time you'll hear us talk about thresholds that are slightly higher because they're bigger people, right? But the fact is, threshold aside, breaking down to power to weight, a 3 watt per kilogram ceiling for a person, I'm not sure I would say that there's a ceiling. Most people should probably be able to get to 3 watts per kilogram, maybe even punch above.
You never know the genetics, right? So
it's tricky.
There could very well be that person who is actually constrained, and that's it. That's all the higher you're going to get.
Yeah.
But I don't think those people are too many.
No, it's and the thing is, like I was talking about in the beginning, we were talking about my training load. Once I get objective with what I've actually done, I see that there's a lot of low hanging fruit, and I can improve.
And this 3 watt per kg rider, I bet if you looked back, you'll find something. You'll find some glaring inadequacy or shortcoming or something that you're not getting quite right. So before you assume that 3 watts is it, there's just nothing you can improve. There probably is.
Yeah, it's a good one.
There's some people talking about tires, and I talked about the GP 5000 TL, which is a very fast tire.
Yes.
I still like that tire. I've got on 2 different sets of wheels. I have that one, and they have the Corsa Speed 2.0 graphing tire. That one is the paper thin, could cut any time. So that is my tire for like crits right now. Especially, or like a flat TT.
Where it's not dangerous or anything. That's enough on the paper thin tire.
But if I get a flat, I have a pit, so I can go get more wheels. And then anything like any training or a long road race, California road race.
Those
GP.
are tubeless?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
They are. No, you can rub me all the time. I don't like it. I mean, I don't care. I like it. Okay. The 5000 TLs for anything road.
Good.
My concern is just when tubeless loses pressure, that's kind of an all or nothing thing.
It
controls.
Yeah, it's true. But these
I guess
days,
it depends how you lose pressure. I mean, if it's a puncture, that's one thing. But if you slash it or burp it,
they really don't burp anymore.
Yeah.
They can. They can.
If they're on tubeless specific tire wheels.
Exactly. Tubeless specific wheels and tires, they've gotten much better. Back when we had hooked rims and everything else, then burping was more common. But these days, it's much less common. That said, still certainly possible, but it's much less common. The thing is, like, if you pop, I've had sudden blowouts at the tube that are more rapid than any other, just as rapid as anything else.
It's the slash. If you get the slash, no matter what's in there, it goes out really fast.
If you slash a tube, if you slash a tubular or tubeless, it's going to be out of there.
Burping's pretty much a thing of the past then.
I've never burped anything.
I don't rail. At the very low pressures, you're
at
80.
Yeah. 90.
Still
that's not low.
I run 60. I run 60
for a road wheel in a hard turn.
Envy's saying like 60.
I run 64 and 68.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I've never had a burping issue.
Okay, cool.
So
and he rails corners.
Yeah.
I think that the main thing is where you get into burping is when you have certain rims don't have an interface that matches up with the tire very well. And in those situations, but that's getting less common these days. Cool. And then, you'll have burping. Burping on mountain bikes used to be way more common. Mm-hmm. I have those NVM 525s and I run Maxxis tires. I have never burped those tires ever.
Great.
So, yeah. And even on the M730s, the gnarly ones on my enduro bike, never burped those either.
Okay.
So, yeah. So for what it's worth, maybe I just don't shred hard enough.
I'll lay those fears to rest then.
I'm going to ask Lee.
Yeah, exactly.
Does Jonathan shred hard enough?
Yeah. Last question. This one is kind of tough to even really quantify, but I think it's interesting. Joe says, how do I know if I'm bad at suffering? I think I'm suffering, but am I really suffering? That's a good question.
I'm of the opinion you can always go deeper, right?
Almost always. Almost always, yeah.
There's always another level that you can go deeper, and it's really just relative to you. How can you increase the rate that you can suffer? Because you can never, this is one of those things that someone says, I suffer, whatever. There's no way to quantify that. So it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you know yourself, did I go deeper in this race? Did I go suffer than ever before? That's the only thing that you can compare to.
I'm thinking of a study, and I may be attributing this incorrectly, but I believe it was referenced, and I found out about it in How Bad Do You Want It by Matt Fitzgerald. But I may be wrong on this.
The pain tolerance they can do.
Yes, the pain tolerance one. And I believe, actually, I think that we were talking about that one where we found that people that had different upbringings.
Yep.
We talked about that.
You want to have just the right amount of adversity in your upbringing. Too much or too little was hard.
Yep. So what I'm getting at with that one is I think that as you suffer more, as you experience suffering more, within the context of cycling specifically, you'll become better at suffering.
Yeah, and it has to be progressed just like training load does. Mm-hmm. You can't just bomb yourself with suffering and expect that to have the desired effect you want, and you can't be too easy on yourself. You got to find that balance, that proper balance.
Yeah. I have 2 ideas, gentlemen.
Oh boy.
2 podcast challenges. Let me know if this should happen. 1, we could try to simulate the pain challenge of putting our hands in ice cold water, whatever they did. And I will totally go battle you guys live in a podcast just as we're talking, just whatever it is.
Okay.
The second one is hot wing challenge for pain. Go all the way up to the Carolina Reaper.
Oh gosh.
And people don't like us eating online, but that could be that one's different though, because people taste capsaicin differently.
Yeah.
So
I'm not particularly. I'm fine with spicy things, but I'm not a big like super hot food guy.
So maybe it's the cold, but I don't know. I'll totally take that challenge on against you guys.
Look at that. All right.
we could just look up the study.
I forfeit. Nate wins.
Yeah.
It could be interesting. And then Joe says, I somehow doubt that suffering will make me faster. I believe that's incorrect. I believe that as you are able to suffer more, you will go faster.
Every
and
workout.
It's not just, exactly. It's not just in the race. It's as you become better at suffering and redefine, because suffering is really redefining your limits, right? And as you become better at doing that through every interval workout that you're doing, not every one of them should be taxing to that degree, but you'll come across them weekly. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you will be increasing your performance potential.
It's part and parcel.
Yep, exactly right. There's some people that sell it, Julian Alaphilippe, or some of the ones that we saw that sell it a little hard. Some of them sell it really hard. Some of them don't sell it hard, but I think that especially if you look at the pro peloton, some of those riders can do a whole lot.
Quintana.
There's
no sell.
There's no sell.
Stony.
Yeah, just stone-faced,
and
right?
You can bet he's hurting.
Oh, he set the fastest time up, whatever climb that he won that stage. He set the fastest time ever.
Yep.
By like a good margin. So clearly he was suffering, right? So
he's dealt with some adversity.
So the one way that doesn't make you better at suffering is trying to sell the suffering harder to yourself or others. It doesn't really help you. It's just sticking to the workouts and making sure that they're right, and you'll get better at it. Okay. And last bit, somebody says, Chad, a 5,000 TL, a GP 5,000 tubeless one, will stay on the rim better than a non-tubeless. It's practically a run flat. And what they mean with that is that it's when they snap onto the bead. Yeah. So before with clinchers, they weren't quite as tight onto the bead, but now the rims and tires are designed so that when they snap onto the bead, they are there. And it takes a good amount of force to get them off.
Good to hear.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Once again, you can do so on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/TrainerRoad. You can check out our race analysis videos that we have up there. We have more coming. Nate's going to record one right after this episode, actually, I think, coming up. And you can also join us on the forum. That's forum.trainerroad.com. Look for episode 214 for notes for this and everything else. And please, if you are watching this right now, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. That really helps this video and it helps us here at TrainerRoad.
Someone gave us a thumbs down.
Oh, man. Hey, it's okay. If you give us a thumbs down, just let us know.
It was the triathlon comment.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Let us know what we can do to be better down in the comments. Share the podcast and check out what we're doing here at TrainerRoad. The outside workouts are awesome. You all should check it out. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.